Chapter 379. I don't know about that. The old woman shrugged helplessly. I don't really understand the specific mechanism, but the thing you took out will definitely help you. If you don't understand, just keep it. I believe it will be useful soon. Okay. Fleischer put away the items and said nervously, "Actually, that's not the main reason I came here. Yesterday's illusion, right?" The old woman nodded. She had obviously seen through the mountain ghost sacred mark on Fleischer. Fleischer breathed a sigh of relief and looked forward to it. It's so troublesome. When a utopia was still around, I should have been able to cross the rainbow bridge and get it done. The old woman scratched her head and pondered for a long time. Suddenly, she snapped her fingers. The scenery outside the window suddenly changed as if they had arrived in front of a snowy mountain. "Okay, you can go out," she said. "You should be able to see it when you go out." Fleischer got up in confusion, pushed the door open, and saw the familiar snowy mountain outside. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before, but he soon realized that this was the snowy mountain he came to when he first entered the Night of the Witch. When he looked back, he found that the hut behind him had disappeared. So he walked forward on the narrow path, passing the cave where he once woke up and the place where he fought with the hyenas in the past. Finally, he stopped at the edge of the river. When he looked down at the waves in the water, he saw his reflection. It was no longer the appearance of the husky, but had become his own appearance. It was just that his appearance was so unfamiliar that it was difficult for him to distinguish. In the reflection, the young man's face did not change much, but the meaning between his eyebrows was different from before. It was as if he had been reborn, as if there was a faint flame. His black pupils were quiet and deep, and the immaturity revealed by his age was swept away. Even if it was the same face and the same expression, no one could treat him as a child. Unknowingly, he seemed to have changed, but it also seemed that he had not. He just became different from the past. Perhaps it was just growth, just a little bit more mature. When a ripple slowly drifted past, Fleischer's reflection slowly changed, revealing his former silhouette, causing him to freeze in place. This was yesterday's illusion. It was already completely different from today. What surprised him even more was that there seemed to be the sound of a bubble bursting in his consciousness. Then, in a trance, the broken pieces of memories in his memory resurfaced from the darkness, mending and filling up every inch of the gaps. Those childhood memories that had long been lost were actually recovered. Not only that, they even continued to be unearthed and extended. In the end, everything from birth to now was still vivid in his mind. The child who once carried a cello and walked alone on the streets seemed to have become a completely different person. But something was still the same. It ran through his short 17 years, and it would continue to come back. The past, the present, and the future. He was still alive. After a long, long time, Fleischer couldn't help but let out a long sigh. He didn't spit out plasma sparks or destroy everything, but he felt that the anxiety and depression in his chest were drawn out of his lungs along with his exhalation. A comfortable coolness spread in his lungs along with his breath, and he couldn't help but stretch his body. He heard a crackling sound in his body. It seemed that he had finally stepped into maturity from a long seedling period. The mountain ghost's sacred mark was growing rapidly. In the end, layers of dark green colors overlapped in the crack on his chest, as if it was about to bloom. Isn't this a little more like it? Fleischer lowered his head and stared at his former self in the reflection. He couldn't help but grin and give his former self a thumbs up. "Keep up the good work, Fleischer." So, the young man in the reflection smiled and gave his future self a thumbs up. In the hidden hut, the girl who had been leaning against the window from beginning to end looked at a certain someone who was laughing foolishly at his reflection. She couldn't help but shake her head and sigh. In the end, there's no sense of existence. Fu-Yi shrugged helplessly. "It feels quite fitting for my character. There are always side effects of evolution. It should be fine after leaving this place." Compared to that, the old man beside her was rather surprised by another thing. "There's no ascension? Could I have been wrong?" She pondered. Presiding over the operation of the Silver Sea, even if it's just an experience, should be enough to complete the ascension. That feeling like I'm floating? Fu, he was stunned. I thought I had caught a cold, but it's not? Ah, I feel like I've missed out on a lot of money. If your own consciousness doesn't reject the change, the ascension won't stop. The old man saw through Fu Yi's disguise at a glance. He was not unhappy about it, but just curious. I have to say, it's rare for you to insist on being a normal person to this extent. Are you the kind who hates ascenders? No, I'm quite envious. Fu Yi thought for a moment before saying seriously, but it's that kind of superficial envy. You can understand, right? Compared to ascenders, I think it's more convenient to be a normal person. Envy, longing, desire. It was true that he had such emotions before, but at most, it was the kind of emotion that he felt through the television. It was like admiring handsome explorers, respecting people who had become heroes, and envying those handsome characters who could still light a cigarette in the midst of a storm of bullets. She knew that she would never be such a person. She did not have that kind of talent, and she did not have a dream that must be realized. Although there were some small impulses occasionally, in the end, it was just that. What's wrong with the children nowadays? One or two of them are either frighteningly stubborn or insufferably rational. The old man raised his eyebrows. I thought. She was silent for a moment before saying seriously, "You will need some changes." I actually think so too. The girl sighed softly. But not long ago, I realized that in fact, the thing I don't desire the most is change. She did not need to change. Even if her father and mother's relationship was broken, and they divorced, even if her mother planned to remarry and have a child, even if her efforts were not rewarded, and reality was getting farther and farther away from the scene she had hoped for. Things in the world were not as one wished. But she could understand all of this. The reality that belonged to her was already perfect enough. Everything was predestined. In fact, everything had already been set in order a long time ago. There was no need for her to add any more unnecessary details. No matter how difficult it was to accept, it was not an excuse to resist and deceive herself. She just needed some time, a little space of her own, a place where she could temporarily escape everything. And a friend who could help her leave all of this. Just like running away from home, there would be a day when she would have to look back at the way home. She was well aware of this, and she did not intend to delay this day for too long. Just for a while. As long as she had a short night of freedom, she could go back and face everything she needed to face. Like a child who had left home, willfully playing, running on the streets, trying everything her parents did not allow. This was her night of freedom. Now, the night of the witch was over. She should go home, even if the outside world was magnificent and huge. I understand. The old man chuckled softly and touched her hair lovingly. You are stronger than I thought. But are you sure you don't need my help? As she spoke, she looked out of the window at the young man who was smiling foolishly by the river. She shook her head and sighed. You don't know if he has a strange brain circuit or is a natural scumbag. Even if the world ends, he won't understand, right? No need. Fu, he looked away from the back of the figure. I changed my mind. He is really a good friend, better than I expected. She was silent for a moment and suddenly said, Unfortunately, I am not. It was too easy to deceive such a person. Fu, he had a deep understanding of this. As long as you smiled at him, he would smile back. As long as you were his friend, he would not guard against you. As long as you asked, he would give. He would do his best. He would never disappoint. Because of this, she did not want to say her most embarrassing request. Would he agree? No. It should be asked, would he refuse? And then, would he be loyal to this relationship? No. Would he betray her? And then what? Would she be happy? The most important thing was, would he feel happy? This was not right? Wasn't love mutual? If it was one-sided demand and one-sided dependence, wouldn't it be like a beggar? Thinking about it carefully, from the past until now, she seemed to be constantly trying to rely on others. Relying on her father's doting, relying on her mother's support, relying on her appearance to get love, relying on her authority to ignore the rules, and then relying on her glib words to get friends when she was at her loneliest. Maybe she was good at this. Maybe even if she relied on others, no one would say anything. But she did not know why. She did not want to rely on those things anymore. Just looking at the back of the figure outside the window, As long as she compared them, she would know that such a parasitic life was not happy at all. It was just begging in the silence. The old man seemed to notice the girl's disappointment. He raised the box in his hand and handed it to her. Smoke. Fu-Yi stretched out her hand, but the box was taken back. No. The old man grinned, like a child who succeeded in a prank. He patted her head. You're still a child. Have some tea. The fragrant and warm teacup came to Fu-Yi's hand. Evelyn, the old man suddenly said. Yes, my name is Evelyn, Evelyn of the Chachel family. The old man smiled and told her, the registered name is Cycle. Although I'm a little late to introduce myself, I hope to be your friend. Fu-Yi was stunned for a long time. After a long time, she lowered her head. Her eyes were filled with tears and seemed to be a little red. My name is Fu-Yi. It means rely on, Fu-Yi, I know. The old man stretched out his hand forcefully and held her hand. He shook it and nodded happily. Then we are friends. Please rest assured and rely on me, even if the time we spent together is so short. She paused for a moment, and her expression became solemn. She was serious and dignified. She asked in a deep voice, then, in the end, I have a question to ask you. In the short, uneasy silence, the corners of her mouth suddenly curled up, revealing a gentle smile. Did you have fun? Fu-Yi was stunned. After a long time, she nodded vigorously. Yes. Then, the smile became gratified, full of joy and satisfaction. The old man reached out and gently hugged the girl in front of him. Then smile, my friend. She kissed the girl's forehead and said goodbye softly. I hope that we can meet again at the source after a long time. You are about to embark on your own journey, and I will return to my home. But before that, she squeezed her eyes like a child preparing for a prank and told her with a smile, I have prepared a surprise for you. Chapter 380. When the bell of morning rang, the temporary bubble that only existed for a night outside the present realm was shattered. Countless illusions dissipated. In the empty world, the old creator slowly looked back and looked at everything that she had created in her life. Now, everything would pass away with her. This was the last moment of her death. When she turned around, she saw a slender figure who had appeared out of nowhere. The black dress flowed on the ground like water, and the red gold embroidery outlined a complicated coat of arms that conveyed profound mysteries. After so many years, she did not seem to have changed at all. Her smile was still the same. When one looked carefully, it was difficult to see her face. One's eyes would only be lost in the thin halo, leaving no impression or memory. However, one could feel the majesty that made one's soul tremble. Yo, long time no see. The woman who suddenly appeared smiled and raised her hand. Yes. Evelyn nodded and sighed softly. Long time no see. Unfortunately, there's not much time left for me. What a pity. She patted the place beside her. Do you mind sitting with me for a while? Of course. The woman came forward and sat beside her. She looked at the wrinkles on her face, and her eyes became sympathetic. It has been hard on you for so many years. The old man shook his head indifferently. For the Republic, isn't this something that should be done? The Republic has been shattered, just like the Republic. I have reminded you on the day it was established. But the mission still continues, doesn't it? The old man chuckled. He opened his backpack and pulled out the box that he had been carrying for many years. Then he handed it over. This is for you. I had thought that I would never have a chance to give it to you. However, it is great to be able to meet you. The box was opened. It was bright gold. It was a holy tree that seemed to grow out of gold, and the slender box was just one of its branches. After so many years, it still carried a stubborn vitality that was difficult to extinguish, and its fragrance was still there. The woman was stunned for a moment and looked up in disbelief. You found it specially for me? The old man shook his head. It is just in passing. Don't feel bad. Thank you. The box was carefully closed. She sighed softly. At least there's one more possibility. It's not easy to hear your gratitude. The old man laughed heartily and patted his knee. Although it's hard work, it's not a loss to be thanked by you once. How about you sacrifice yourself for the gods? her slender arms intimately wrapped around the old man's shoulders as she asked, "Is there anything else I could do for you? Don't worry and make your wish boldly. I'm not the stingy type. That's all." The old man shook his head and thought for a moment. "It's not easy to see you. Why don't you accompany me for a while? Isn't that natural?" She held the old woman's gradually tired body and gently accompanied Evelyn by her side. The two of them quietly stared at the shattered dream. They watched as the sky gradually dissipated, the earth collapsed, and everything disappeared into the darkness from the crack in the bubble. The magnificent light of the emergence realm was revealed. The beautiful rainbow-like light reflected in the old woman's eyes, making her eyes seem as if they had been lit up, resplendent and flawless. There was no loss, and there was no regret. She just quietly stared at the world that she had spent her life guarding, as if she had seen this magnificent creation for the first time. The pure eyes of a child were shining. "Look," she murmured in a trance, "this world is so beautiful." "Yes," the gentle voice that accompanied her softly recited. "Look at the swaying world carrying the sky. Look at the earth and the ocean and the distant sky. Look at how everything sings for the future. This is the world that you have created, the era that truly belongs to you. This is the honor and reputation that you deserve in your life." The solemn and gentle voice told her, "I will witness you, just as you once witnessed me." So the old woman smiled. She was satisfied. As the mournful bell in the distance gradually dissipated, a crack quietly appeared on the old woman's face. "Is it my time?" "Yes." A pair of arms gently hugged her, stroked her white hair, and gently said goodbye. "Goodbye, my little Cheshire cat." "Shouldn't it be goodbye forever?" The old woman smiled and sighed softly. "Goodbye forever, my friend, goodbye forever." In the silence after the bell, she fell into a deep sleep. Along with the bubbles, she sank into an eternal sweet dream. She didn't wake up. Huaisha finally opened his eyes. He felt thirsty and weak, as well as waves of dizziness. It was as if he had a hangover, and he couldn't help but collapse. His origin substance had dried up. The witch's night had consumed too much of his origin substance. Even though he had an abundance of origin substance, he couldn't help but have a splitting headache. He didn't know where he was. Then he saw the saddlebag that had appeared at his waist at some point, as well as the familiar 10 fingers and the familiar ceiling. He had returned home. It was as if a lifetime had passed. Although time was speeding up, the long, long experience still made him feel an indescribable exhaustion and sleepiness, as well as a deep sense of doubt. Was he in a dream or in reality? Was he the child of the past, the giant beast just now, or the young man now? It was hard to tell. While he was deep in thought, a white hand suddenly reached out from the side, holding a cup. It broke his daze and pulled him back to reality. Coffee, freshly brewed. "Want some?" He looked up and saw a delicate, impeccable face, as well as a slight smile on her lips. Huaisha couldn't help but sigh. "It's rare to see you like this." "I went to see an old friend, so I had to put on some makeup." Crow shrugged. "Judging from your appearance, you must have gained quite a bit, right? Do you want some coffee?" "The kind with a sleeping agent added." Huaisha climbed out of bed. He didn't take the cup, but he couldn't help but open his arms and hug her tightly. Crow froze, as if she had been frightened. "I haven't seen you in so long that I'm not used to it." Huaisha awkwardly let go of her. He realized that he had been rude, and then said earnestly, "Thank you." Crow looked away and took a sip from the cup. "I don't remember doing anything good." "Ah, crap." She suddenly realized that she had forgotten to add sleeping pills to the coffee. Huaisha left her there and rushed out of the basement. He ran into the living room and shouted into the kitchen, "Feng Shu, I'm back." "Ah, young master, welcome back." The old man in an apron poked his head out. "Breakfast is almost ready. Do you want the eggs fully cooked?" Or, without waiting for him to finish, Huaisha rushed forward and gave him a big hug. The old man was stunned for a long time, and then he felt a little embarrassed. "Did something happen?" "No, nothing. I'm just very grateful to you." Huaisha took 2 steps back and waved his hand. "I'm going out first. It's urgent. I'll come back for lunch at noon." "Ah, young master, wait a minute. At least first." Before Feng Shu could finish, Huaisher had already pulled his coat and pushed the door open. He ran wildly, dragging the bicycle that he had just repaired and pedaling with all his might. He headed to the city. He didn't know how Fu Yi was and if she was in any danger. He had to confirm it. Otherwise, he would feel uneasy. The bicycle that had just been repaired creaked under the rough pedaling. Huaisher sped all the way and rushed into the city. He didn't even have time to stop the bike before he left it beside the stairs and rushed into the hotel. Ward round. Without explaining, Huaisher directly slapped his ID on the desk at the front desk. Hurry up. Fu, you should be staying here, right? This time, unexpectedly, the front desk didn't doubt his age. Perhaps he was directly convinced by the persuasive power of the soul link. He quickly pulled up the records and was stunned. What's wrong? Huaisher frowned. She's not here. He had clearly sent her to the hotel yesterday. No, Ms. Fu Yi did stay here last night. The front desk raised his head in confusion. 5 minutes ago, she checked out. She should have just left. They brushed past each other. Huaisher was stunned for a long time. However, according to the front desk, Fu Yi didn't seem to be abnormal. Instead, she seemed to be alive and kicking. She shouldn't have suffered any harm. But to run away without even saying goodbye, she didn't have him as a good brother in her heart at all. This suddenly made Huaisher a little disappointed. After walking out of the hotel, he felt a wave of fatigue. He sat on the stairs and stared blankly at the traffic in the distance. The doorman didn't know what he wanted to do, but because of his ID, he didn't dare to drive him away. He could only stand in the distance and watch with some worry. In the silence, light footsteps came from behind him. A rather sturdy-looking dog walked over, passed by him, stopped, and then skillfully raised one of its hind legs and sprinkled a string of liquid with a strong smell. Finally, its tail wagged proudly and swung past the tip of Huaisher's nose. Even a dog dares to bully me. Huaisher woke up from his daze and couldn't help but be angry. But when he took a closer look, he couldn't help but be stunned. The classic black and white color scheme, the icy blue eyes, the unruly gaze, and the devilish smile when he grinned, as well as the overly large physique. Why did it look so familiar? And why was this stupid dog looking at him with such disdain? Huaisher, Huaisher, don't run around. In the direction of the parking garage, a panicked voice sounded. Come back quickly. Why did you pee? I'm sorry, I haven't bought a rope yet, Sai. Huaisher, why are you here? Huaisher turned back helplessly and looked at the embarrassed Fu Yi. He then looked at the husky that was playing happily at Fu Yi's feet, pointed at it, and then pointed at himself. What's your name? It's a long story. Fu Yi awkwardly reached out and violently pulled the tail that was sweeping Huaisher's face and pulled the husky back. After the prank, the husky even grinned proudly at Huaisher, revealing a mouth full of small sharp teeth with a metallic color. The behemoth in dogskin sneezed and squatted down obediently next to Fu Yi. Its noble head was raised, and its icy blue eyes were bright and full of expression, looking very majestic. In the indescribable awkwardness, Fu Yi reached out and pointed at a rope that was exposed in Huaisher's saddlebag. Can you lend me the rope? It even chewed up someone's bumper just now. Huaisher lowered his head, opened the saddlebag, and looked at the collar inside and the dog in front of him. He was stunned for a long time. His expression gradually became very interesting. In the end, the teenager's shoulders shook, but he couldn't help but laugh loudly. It was as if he finally felt this little joke from fate. He was overjoyed. Hint instruction number 3. Please be friends with Fu Yi forever. Chapter 381. In the silent hall, the attendees sat silently in their seats, raising their heads and gazing ahead. The people who had come from all over the world were different. Some were old, some were young, some were fat, some were thin, some were ugly, some were beautiful. Elites in suits, farmers with sunburn marks on their faces, and workers with calluses on their fingers were sitting on the same bench. It was a strange sight. This place should be a temple, but there was no statue in the temple. The huge stone foundation only carried the projection of the realm of discovery that was constantly operating. Under the projection, the calm voice continued. How can we ensure the continuation of everything to the greatest extent? The middle-aged man named Jaeger stood under the projection and solemnly read the report from the Continuation Institute. The symbiosis of groups? The sole existence of individuals? Genetic inheritance? Or is it the continuation of civilization? I believe that this is the final question that the fallen creator left for all his colleagues. A question that is worth us spending a lifetime to explore. This is not just an apocalyptic response exercise. Among them, the crucial biomaterialization, also known as ether sublimation, will be uploaded in the preload area of the 3 secret instruments in the next 3 cycles. According to our calculations, this technology has successfully set back the Doomsday clock by 4 minutes. This is a great and merciful creation for all the ordinary people in the present realm. To this day, the legacy of the utopia is still constantly guarding the entire world. But what she did was far more than that. Jaeger said solemnly, what she gave us was even more than we imagined, including a brand new breakthrough in the study of the elements of destruction. In Ms. Chatchell's final experiment, we successfully observed a new discovery. By simulating the food chain of ranchers, our results are infinitely close to the category of the beast of eternal life. Not only did we establish the opposite and corresponding conclusion between the two, but we also got more than we expected. Even if those present did not understand the complicated theories and terms circulating among scholars, they still understood the meaning of this result from their assistants. This dangerous result was not so much a surprise as it was more appropriate to call a shock. The reason was that the idea was too crazy, like a heavenly steed soaring across the sky. It was comparable to a high-speed train driving on the highway, rampaging, ignoring the rules and taboos as if they were nothing. He completely regarded the extremely dangerous elemental of destruction as a lab rat in a cage. After a long period of research and countless failures, he finally succeeded in connecting the two on the same main axis under a specific perspective. A perfect balance and commonality had been found between the two. Using this as a foundation, he built a set of completely feasible theoretical tools. No, it should be called a bridge. Whether it was analyzing the beast of eternal life by studying the rancher, or researching the existence of the rancher by studying the beast of eternal life, the massive amount of research on the two would be transformed through this bridge. Even if there were limitations, it was still equivalent to opening up a brand new path. A new field of abyssal biology would be created in Evelyn's hands. From now on, there would be countless scholars carrying on the torch and following the path she blazed. She unreservedly gave him a fish. This lady still made a great contribution to the present realm in the last minute before she passed away. Jaeger propped up his crutches, tried to prop up his calves, straightened his body, and said solemnly, "Here, I propose that everyone stand up and observe a moment of silence for the passing of this wise woman." Without hesitation, no matter where they came from, no matter where they were going, whether it was the Directorate of Defense, the Preservation Court, the Technical Department, the Archaeological Team, or even the Stone Cauldron Society, the Bronze Eye, and so on outside the Astronomical Society, no matter where the representatives came from, at this moment under Jaeger's initiative, all the participants stood up in unison and bowed their eyes solemnly to the old woman who appeared from the projection, paying the highest respect. A full 3 minutes. Even if it was only 3 minutes. The whole world stopped moving for her passing. This was the funeral of the Creator. Chapter 382. Name: Why sure. Age: 17 years old. Professional student, right? Yes, part-time supervisor of Xian High Astronomy Association, disaster musician, abyss chef, and a bunch of other stuff? In the security room, Huaishur sat behind the chair and introduced himself sincerely. He then placed his ID on the table. The security guard had an expression that said, "Are you King kidding me?" He had probably never seen such a serious Chinibu before. After a long silence, he could not figure out what this guy wanted to do. Could he be the child of the factory's leader? No, wait, there was no one with the surname Hua in the factory. What's the reason for your visit? The security guard tapped the pen on the table. Who are you looking for? Do you have a way to contact them? Do you want me to call them out for you? It would be great if you could call them out for me. The young man sitting across the table also laughed. I'm here to look for the boss of this biopharmaceutical company, Ding Nank, and his 6 accomplices. They violated the Border Material Control Regulations and were arrested by the supervisor of Exine High Astronomy Association, which is me, although this thing is usually referred to as a black letter. As he spoke, the young man pulled out a heavy longsword from his saddlebag. He was stunned for a moment before he awkwardly put it back. Sorry, I took the wrong one. It's this. This time, a letter with a black cover was placed on the table and slowly pushed over. It stopped before the security guard. The security guard frowned. What the hell? He picked up the letter in confusion and looked around. After confirming that this was a prank, his expression became more and more unhappy. Then he saw the little red dots that fell on his body from outside the window. They were like little stars in the sky, twinkling and twinkling. Locked on by the infrared sight, he raised his head blankly and finally saw the suppression team poking their heads out from the high wall outside the window and the shiny black barrels in their hands. The Good Brothers' long guns had a persuasive power that words could not compare to. In an instant, the security guard understood Huaishi's intention. He obediently knelt on the ground and covered his head with his hands. I don't know anything. I'm just a worker. The Good Brothers who rushed and didn't care about this. Regardless of whether it was a human or a ghost, they would first pin it on the neck and slowly settle the score later. Following Huaishi's signal, they instantly jumped over the wall and launched an attack inside. His movements were extremely fast, like a hot knife through butter. Huaishi cheered him on from behind. Charge! Charge! Good luck, comrades! Although the Russian Federation is big, we have nowhere to go. Behind us is M.O. Before he could finish his sentence, Old Fu almost kicked him from behind. Shut up. Don't interfere with the command. He pointed to the side with a look of disdain. Old Wong, take out your phone and let the kid play with it for a while. Don't let him cause trouble. I'm a dignified inspector. I'm just trying to boost morale. How am I interfering with the command? You call that depressing? How is that boosting morale? All right, then how about I perform a Bach on a accompanied cello suite for everyone? Look, Old Wong just looked over. He wants to hear it. Old Wong, who was next to them, looked up at the sky. He didn't want to continue the conversation at all. If he wasn't well informed, he wouldn't have known. There were rumors in the bureau that Huaishi had been taken home by the director's daughter and slept in the same room every day. It was said that the director didn't even dare to interfere. He heard from Secretary Xiao Li that when he came to deliver the documents, he even heard him arguing with the family dog at home. Maybe he was under too much pressure these 2 days and was angry. He was thinking about when to tactfully persuade the director to see a psychiatrist. He was distracted and didn't pay attention to the quarreling 2 people at all, until the sound of gunfire came from the depths of the pharmaceutical factory. The roar was endless. Soon, his expression changed. These bastards had grenades. At this moment, he looked at Director Fu and asked for instructions. Director Fu also knew that this was not the time to quarrel. He suppressed his anger and glared at Huaishi. What he meant was, what are you waiting for? Go. Huaishi took out his phone and sat at the side. He looked as if he didn't understand why his uncle was glaring at him. Old Fu's face turned red and green. He gritted his teeth and stomped his feet. He pulled out his pistol and prepared to charge. But he was immediately stopped by Huaishi. What a joke. If anything happened to him, how would he face his good brother in the future? Okay, I'll do it, okay? He pressed Old Fu down on the chair. Brother Xiang Wang, you're precious. Don't take risks so easily. Old Fu's face turned green when he saw that Huaishi had changed his address from Old Fu to Brother Xiang Wang. However, he couldn't get angry. He could only suppress the pain in his liver. Huaishi sighed in his heart. I'll bring him a few bottles of liver protection pills during the new year. It's not easy for this brother of mine. After taking advantage of him, Huaishi finally patted her butt and walked to the front. All the resisting enemies had hidden in a 4-story office building. Now, they had sealed the windows and were holding all kinds of prohibited weapons to confront the suppression forces outside. They shouted that they wanted to negotiate. It was a pity that this place was too close to the city. It was not convenient for tanks and mortars to be used. Otherwise, according to Director Fu's temper, he wouldn't care about the damn judges. Drag them all to the main cannon of the tank to talk. Huaishir walked to the bunker in front of him and took the loudspeaker from the captain. He stuck his head out and shouted, "Listen up, the people inside. You've been surrounded by me." The curtains on the second floor suddenly shook. Huaishir suddenly shrank his head and felt a shrill whistle fly over his head. He was stunned for a moment and then became furious. "Damn it, I'm the Xinhai Inspector, Jinling Decapitation King, Disaster Musician, and the Abyss Cooking Demon. I'm the rising star of the administration. I'm a fourth-class military officer of the Astronomy Association. I'm here to negotiate with you. Not only do you not surrender, you even dare to fight back? You're revolting. Fine, since you don't want to eat prison food, then I'll treat the whole village to a meal." He rummaged through his saddlebag for a long time and found a bottle that looked like a wine jug from a pile of junk. He weighed it in his hand and threw it into the door that had been blown open by the suppression forces. The bottle drew an arc in the air and quickly fell behind the door. The lackey sent by the smugglers behind the door saw a black thing thrown in and almost jumped up in shock. Then he saw the thing hit the wall and exploded. A handful of scarlet things splashed out and flowed all over the ground. 2 more drops fell on his hand. He lowered his head to look at them and carefully sniffed them. He was in disbelief. Is this blood? Then he saw a faint layer of dark green sprouting quickly in the 2 drops of blood. It looked like mold. He felt that he couldn't breathe. It was difficult to breathe, and his body quickly became numb. Not only him, but everyone in the hall at the moment felt their bodies become stiff. Countless strains of mold sprouted in their mouths, noses, and the corners of their eyes, spreading all the way to their lungs. Half a minute later, everyone who could move could not help but bend over and vomit violently. But all they vomited was their own blood. The fierce poison from the abyss directly caused a massive hemorrhage in their stomachs. Not long after the blood flowed out, it turned into blood clots covered in dark green mold. Not long after, the 10 or so people who had been stubbornly resisting were all paralyzed on the ground. They were out of breath. Seeing that after Huaishir threw in a bag of things, the inside quieted down as if it had been sprayed with insecticide. All the good brothers of the suppression forces were stunned. Only Huaishir lit a cigarette with a lonely expression and sighed to the sky. "It's poison," he said. He said, "I poison the blood." Simply put, he used his own beginner-level alchemy to release his own blood. After pouring in a pile of origin substance, calamity ash, and 2 drops of azure crown dragon blood, he didn't care what kind of person he was. He made a pot of stew and used the crudest method to stimulate the poison in it. Then he put it in a bottle. The shelf life was about 12 hours. He just needed to drink it as soon as he opened the bottle. When necessary, he could use it as a blood bag and transfuse it back to himself. After all, it was his blood and his poison. He couldn't poison himself. Excluding the speechless look in Crow's eyes, he felt that he was a genius. After lingering for a long time and not leaving, he finally took 2 submachine guns and 5 or 6 magazines from the Special Affairs Department. He finally came out from behind cover and carried the 2 submachine guns to the hall behind the door. "Hello, where are you, fellow countrymen?" He yelled at the top of his lungs. "Astronomy will give you warmth." Unfortunately, no one responded to him. There was only the sound of labored breathing. Huaishir couldn't help but sigh. These days, no one wanted the warmth that was delivered to their doorstep. When he thought about how the Special Affairs Department had invited them to tea for free, Huaishir was moved by their noble character and unquestionable integrity. After being moved for 5 or 6 seconds, he heard the faint sound of a whistle coming from upstairs. Suddenly, hoarse moans could be heard from behind him. Huaishir didn't even turn his head. He aimed behind him and pulled the trigger. After a series of gunshots, a guy covered in green fur fell to the ground. Immediately afterwards, even more moans could be heard from ground. The lackeys, who had been on the verge of death, began to squirm and crawl up from the ground. It was as if they had turned into zombies. Their faces were pale, and their eyes glowed with a dark green light. This was the sign of Origin's substance burning itself. Huaishur knew with a single glance that this group of people was completely dead. Originally, even if they had been poisoned by Huaishur, they would only have to stay in the ICU for a few days. But now, it seemed that this group of people had been injected with the zombie serum. Once they were stimulated by something, they would quickly transform into something that was neither human nor ghost. They would madly attack all living things in front of them. Even when they died, they wouldn't know that they had become someone else's cannon fodder. That's why they dare to get involved in border smuggling when they couldn't do anything else. Are they afraid that they won't die quickly enough? Huaishur shook his head. He raised his gun and prepared to give them a quick death. Immediately afterwards, he felt the ground beneath his feet shake, and a cracking sound came from above him. As countless cracks grew, the heavy concrete floor came crashing down on Huaishur. In the blink of an eye, a fleeting shadow jumped out from the countless concrete fragments. Before he could react, it suddenly appeared behind Huaishur. The sickle in its hand chopped down at his neck. Then he saw Huaishur raise his hand and let go of the weapon in his hand. From under Huaishur's feet, a pitch-black shadow quickly rose up and caught the two submachine guns falling from the air. It faced him and revealed the narrow darkness in the barrels. Then, the red glove pulled the trigger. Dazzling flames spewed out from the darkness. Chapter 383. There was a change in the armpit. Just as you were about to sneak in and cut off the neck of a little bastard, you suddenly realized that the person you were facing was a substitute. Furthermore, the substitute had two submachine guns in his hands. The two black barrels of the guns were raised, and the trigger was pulled. That fleeting shadow suddenly trembled and actually flew backwards without touching the ground. The sickle in its hand was lifted up and twisted in the air like a key. An invisible gravitational force burst out from it, pulling the red glove's bullets into a bundle and wrapping around the hook. It was like burning red peanuts floating around a curved iron branch. As the red gloves continued to shoot, more and more bullets stopped on the hook. In the end, the hook seemed to be overwhelmed. It was burned red by the kinetic energy, and layers of cracks appeared. Fortunately, before the collapse, there was finally the sound of an empty magazine, which made the attacker breathe a sigh of relief. As he waved his hand, countless bullets fell to the ground and crackled. It was a narrow escape. As countless fragments of the ceiling continued to fall, a burly and bloated figure fell straight toward Huaishur from the second floor. The guy was like an iron ball. The wriggling fat all over his body had a metallic sheen. As he moved, two big hands suddenly closed, 10 fingers interlocked, aimed at Huaishur's head, and suddenly smashed down like a volleyball. The wind was fierce. The attacker had no doubt about the power of this punch. This punch, even if it hit the front of a truck, could overturn it. It was easy to deal with such a body of flesh and blood. But then he saw that Huaishur stood firmly in place. His feet were separated from his shoulders, and his knees were slightly bent. Huaishur took a deep breath. He raised his empty hands behind his head, as if he was holding something invisible. He roared with all his might. Then, the metallic sheen condensed in the air and gathered between his 10 fingers. It multiplied inch by inch, and in an instant, outlined the outline of a ferocious iron hammer. It looked like the ferocious head of a giant beast. The front part of the hammer was covered in layers of scales, vaguely forming the outline of a wolf's head. There were even 2 curved and sharp horns extending forward from the wolf's head. At the end of the hammer head, the tightly shut scales and carapace suddenly trembled, and the 6 nozzles opened abruptly. Endless pain converged into a blazing torrent, spurting out from the nozzles, bursting forth with power like a rocket engine. As the hammer broke through the air, a roar could be heard. It sounded like the angry howl of a giant wolf, setting off the lingering sound of rolling thunder. In the blink of an eye, Huaishur's raised hammer accelerated to an unimaginable speed. Following Huaishur's movements, it smashed forward, aiming directly at the bloated sublimator that was descending from the sky, unreservedly placing all of his power and momentum into that strike. "Let's go," It was as if he had kicked a dead pig while walking in the grass. She heard a low, muffled sound. A weak feeling of blockage came from the handle of the hammer. Then, as if a bubble had been popped, another explosion sounded from the thunder. Boom! Before he landed, the fat ascendant let out a blood-curdling scream and was sent flying in front of Huai Shi by this attack. The swollen body quickly deformed under the impact of the hammer. At the point of impact, a dent suddenly spread out, setting off layers of waves of flesh. Wherever the hammer passed, the fatty flesh that glowed with a metallic light fell apart. Only a waterfall of blood spurted out from the big hole in the chest. Dragging a blood-red trail, he smashed through one wall after another, rolling on the ground pathetically. Finally, after rolling for dozens of meters, he finally stopped in front of the wall of the factory. He turned into a softball. Witnessing this terrifying attack, the sickle-wielding sublimator didn't even remember to be afraid. Instead, it instinctively seized this opportunity and charged forward once more. It wanted to go around the red gloves and attack Huai Shi's defenseless back. Backstab. Then he felt a chill on his back and in his heart. Looking down, he saw a gorgeous sacrificial knife piercing through his chest, but there was no blood spurting out because all the blood was absorbed by the sacrificial knife. He could only feel his life rapidly draining away. How was this possible? He turned his head with difficulty and saw a fleeting black shadow, as well as an old face shrouded in gray fog. The eyes were malicious, and the old face was grinning strangely at him. It was like a ghost. No, it was indeed a ghost, but how? He looked in front of him in disbelief and saw that it was indeed the red gloves blocking Huai Shi's back. He could not understand. Why were there two? He fell to the ground pathetically, the hook in his hand falling out. After losing the supply of origin substance, it finally broke inch by inch. Before he completely fainted, he only heard Huai Shi's voice of praise. Chiwen, well done, the second ghost. Ever since he returned from the Night of the Witch, the mountain ghost sacred mark had grown again, causing the Nibelungen ring to welcome a new growth, giving birth to his second ghost. And for some reason, when Huai Shi took out the Book of Destiny and slapped it on the forehead, Chiwen suddenly appeared, becoming the second tool. What the hell is going on? Huai Shi couldn't understand it all. Does this mean that everyone who has a grudge against me will never be able to reincarnate? If this was in some fantasy novel, it would definitely be the plot of a big villain boss, something like imprisoning the enemy's soul and torturing it for hundreds of years. If this boss was even a little more despicable, it would become someone who couldn't be provoked and would be toyed with, someone who couldn't be provoked with Chiwen's face. Huai Shi trembled just thinking about this scene. Even though he felt uncomfortable, he quickly discovered that this second tool was quite useful. Unlike the Red Glove's direct and unyielding fighting style, this old guy was very bad, sinister, and cowardly. Without Huai Shi's command, it would definitely hide in a corner and never face the enemy head-on. Its old eyes were always looking at someone's back, as if it was always ready to lock them up. Shooting from the back, stunning them, sprinkling lime, poisoning them, it was as dirty as it could get. Throwing these two out, one pulling aggro and one stabbing in the back, seemed to work quite well together. It was just that it got dirtier and dirtier, which made Huai Shi occasionally feel that this evil duo really couldn't be kept. It wasn't just Huai Shi. Seeing their own people being taken away by such a dirty trick, the group of smugglers all sucked in a breath of cold air. King poisoning and stabbing in the back. Who exactly was the villain? Seeing the two people who were the best at fighting being taken away like vegetables, the expressions of the other people suddenly turned ugly. The Social Security Bureau is rushing over again. The person spying by the window turned around with a frightened expression. Second brother, what should we do? Grab your weapons and take down that little bastard from the Astronomy Society first. I don't believe the Social Security Bureau dares to do anything. Second brother took out his key, opened the secret cabinet in his office, took out the metal box inside, and distributed the weapons with a cold expression. At this point, we can only fight to the death. Don't think about being lenient after surrendering. I've never seen anyone who can successfully lie in front of the Astronomy Society. The things we've done are enough to kill us dozens of times. Even if we don't succeed, we'll have a quick death. If we're caught alive, we'll beg for death. The gloomy tone made everyone shiver. Immediately, they clenched the weapons in their hands, and a murderous look appeared on their faces. A successful pre-war mobilization had strengthened everyone's willpower. Some people even couldn't help but applaud and praise. Outside the door, in an instant, everyone in the room felt a sudden chill. Before they could even react, the door exploded. Literally, in the eruption of flames, it was torn apart into countless metal shards that whizzed through the air, turning the room into a mess. Then, the heavy sound of steel rubbing against the ground was heard, and sparks flew. The slightly skinny young man dragged a hammer that didn't match his style at all as he walked through the door step by step and smiled at his stunned opponents. "Looks like you've finished your pre-war mobilization. I'm not late, am I?" The hammer that was condensed from pain slowly rose again, and the 6 nozzles at the end ignited with blazing flames. It illuminated the smile on Huaishi's face. "If possible, I hope you don't resist. Otherwise, I'm not too confident that I'll leave your corpses intact." Boom! The loud sound of something breaking through the air burst out again. As Huaishi spun around, the flaming hammer roared in the air and drew a fierce arc. In the blink of an eye, a sublimator who pounced on him was smashed against the wall. It was very even. The thickness difference was no more than 3 centimeters. It was just that the liquid was a little ugly when it flowed down, making everyone's face pale. "Don't be afraid." At the critical moment, someone stood up and shouted angrily, "Did you forget what second brother said just now?" "Second brother?" Huaishir didn't understand and looked behind them. "Are you talking about the one who ran away when I came in?" An awkward silence suddenly fell. It was only now that they realized that their second brother had disappeared without them knowing. Only a secret door that couldn't be closed in time proved that he had once existed. "That's why I hate smugglers like you. You don't know what professionalism is at all." Huaishir sighed and raised the hammer again. "You don't seem very smart. I want to ask you where Ding Nank is, but I'm afraid you don't know. I'll try my best to give you a quick." It turned out that the Special Affairs Division was still useful. After Huaishir smashed the limbs of these guys who were in the way, the suppression team told him through the radio that his second brother had confessed. He took the initiative to surrender. He knelt down cleanly. It was completely different from what he had told his brothers. The moment the suppression team rushed in, he pounced on them. Before Mingnan's brothers could react, he had already told them everything. Regardless of how skillfully he wanted to clear his name, at least he told them something. For example, he told them about the account book and the place where the important goods were stored. Now, Old Fu was checking the smuggled goods and cursing along the way. There was no doubt that this was a huge case. However, even though he told them a lot of things, his second brother couldn't tell them where Ding Nank was. According to him, Ding Nank's whereabouts had been strange since last week. The night before, 2 guests came and Ding Nank was in charge of receiving them personally. He didn't let anyone else interfere. The 2 guests left the next morning. After they came back, Ding Nank didn't show his face again. It was as if he had disappeared. No one knew if Ding Nank had been silenced by his own guests because he knew too much. Before Huaishir rushed in to enforce the law, everyone was still discussing whether or not they should split up and return to Gao Village. Amazing. Huaishir was stunned. They're really all traitors. With such a group of good brothers, even if Ding Nank died, he would be so happy that he would laugh out loud, right? "No, I don't feel like laughing at all." A hoarse voice sounded from outside the door. Chapter 384. "No, I actually don't want to laugh at all." Outside the door, a hoarse voice sounded. "Even if they split all the money and ran away, I don't care. After all, I didn't expect this motley crew to be useful from the beginning. What's more, it's the Astronomy Club." The voice said, "If I'm not wrong, it should be the Guillotine King of Jinling, right?" As Huaishir turned around, he saw a figure in the originally empty corridor. He stood in front of the broken window, in a ray of light, but the trace was exceptionally fleeting, like a bubble. The middle-aged man had slightly long hair, and his beard seemed to have not been shaved for a long time. His expression was cold, but unexpectedly, there was no resentment nor anger. He was just calm, even if he was deep in the middle of a siege. Ding Nank stared at him, then nodded in greeting. I've heard a lot about you, Prince of Paradise. Or should I call you Your Highness? Huh, you're also my fan? Huaishir tilted his head, puzzled. Seeing your nest being destroyed, you're not angry? You're angry because a 10-year-old umbrella is broken? Ding Nank laughed mockingly. It has completed its mission, so it's not a pity that it's damaged and destroyed. I could still get a new one. If possible, I really want to give you a thumbs up for your tolerance. Huaishir slowly raised his eyebrows. However, I can't help but feel a little angry when I find that someone treats astronomy as harmless as rain. As he said that, he picked up the sledgehammer in his hand again and asked seriously, since you came back after running away, I think you must be prepared to be hammered to death by me, right? Ah, of course. Ding Nank grinned and laughed mockingly. 3 folding knives slid out of his cuffs and were held lightly by one hand. With a flick of his fingers, the crisscrossed blades deftly unfolded at his fingertips. Black, red, white. The 3 folding knives looked like 3 butterflies made of iron. They told me that you're very strong. He paused and said seriously, I don't really believe it. You should be the kind of anti-fan who hasn't even watched my live streams, right? Huaishir sighed. What a pity. You should have seen it. Without any shame or modesty, he said seriously, as long as you read it, you will realize I am indeed very strong. Poochie. Ding Nank was amused by Huaishir's words. He didn't even know if he should say that this kid was boasting shamelessly. In fact, he was well aware of Huaishir's battle record. He didn't look down on them at all. Just as he was about to open his mouth to speak, Huaishir stomped his feet. Use steps. To be more precise, it should be a special application method to increase speed and agility to the limit through multiple steps within a short distance. Crushing steps. It was as if he was taking small steps, but with each step, his speed increased by another point. Wherever he passed, under the ravaging of his feet, the cement floor was scraped out a deep gully. Countless overlapping footprints were deeply carried into the floor, forming a slightly curved trajectory that extended forward. And with countless twists and turns in an instant, Huaishir twisted his arm, spurting out flames from the hammer of pain, and smashed it toward Ding Nank in front of him. The bubble burst. The entire floor of the second floor suddenly shook. No, it should be said that the entire building was shaking from the sudden impact. Countless pieces of the floor fell apart and fell down. Even the load-bearing walls were covered with cracks. In midair, Huaishir saw Ding Nank's figure appear in front of him again like a nightmare. The speed was unbelievably fast, almost exceeding the limit of Huaishir's vision. And when he saw the other party's scarlet eyes and the sharp canine teeth exposed from the mouth, he suddenly realized a vampire. However, there were no traces of commandments. It was not a vampire of the Roman lineage. It seemed to be a vampire of the American lineage. It was not Gabriel's Road of Radiance, but the blue-crowned dragon lineage that was formed in history after Van Helsing abandoned commandments and beliefs and embraced the miracle of the abyss. They were too familiar with each other. Huaishir grinned and didn't even need to think. The hammer of pain in his hand suddenly became 3, and the hand behind his back naturally pulled out the sword of virtue from the buckle of the saddlebag and blocked in front of him. Prediction. The next moment, the cold light of 2 folding knives whistled past the sword ridge. In midair, Ding Nank ignored gravity and bounced between the walls. In just over a second, he launched 6 attacks. If not for the help of the Mirror of Nothingness, Huaishir would have been almost unable to block such a frequency of ferocious attacks. Among the 3 comprehensions he had now obtained, the true essence of nothingness, yesterday's phantom, and the soul link. The soul link could make his words more persuasive and empathize with and understand the situation of others. Yesterday's phantom brought about the miraculous effect of looking back on the past and washing away the haze, making up for the latent flaws and shortcomings in Huaishir's mind, allowing him to transcend the haze of the past. The effect of the true essence of nothingness was the simplest: hearing and seeing clearly. It directly enhanced Huaishi's perception, allowing him to see through the enemy's weaknesses and details that he usually didn't notice. Similarly, this was the strongest of all the comprehensions that Huaishi had, because in the process of comprehending, Huaishi's soul directly merged with the strange mirror used to worship the sun witches in Yamatai Hell, forming the mirror of nothingness today. In an instant, a large amount of life force was burned, magnifying Huaishi's premonition and awareness of death, allowing Huaishi to briefly deduce the enemy's next move and fatal attack, and make the most correct response within the scope of his ability. Although he still couldn't block what should be blocked, such as when a passing Bichimos spat at him, Huaishi still had to die. But if he encountered a problem that he could deal with within the scope of his ability, then he could easily solve it. For example, now, Ding Nank was completely useless. As a traitorous demon hunter who had personally played the role of a vampire and even experienced an advancement, Huaishi was not afraid of the opponent's combat power, which was directly one level above him. He raised the sword of virtue and the sacrificial knife with both hands. The frequency of the metronome increased. During the short fall, Huaishi countered, his defense impeccable, and even stabbed at Ding Nank with the accelerated melody of CC. A crack was torn open on the vampire's face. Disfigurement. Stepping on the lingering sound of the broken floor, Huaishi landed and finally stood firm in the ruins. He raised the sword of virtue in his hand and pointed it at Ding Nank's face. Suddenly, he asked, "Can you play the cello?" Without waiting for Ding Nank to respond, he grinned and answered his own question. "I can, and he must be the best cello player among all the ascendants." Yu's steps accelerated, and the broken floor under Huaishi's feet collapsed again, and Huaishi had already shot out, charging at Ding Nank and slashing down with his blade. The concert from the abyss began again. The musicians of Calamity played the sound of death, with his favorite Bach's unaccompanied overture. As the opening, Huaishi launched a brazen attack. In an instant, he pierced through the defense of the folding knife, and another sword wound appeared on Ding Nank's body. Ding Nank's flesh and blood wriggled, but the wound could not close. This was natural. The evil physique of a vampire was ineffective in front of Huaishi's sword of positive energy. The sacrificial knife was even more vicious. It directly sucked blood, even the blood of a vampire. It was simply cannibalism. However, after noticing the strangeness of the weapon in Huaishi's hand, Ding Nank no longer gave him any advantage. Without warning, he suddenly retreated and widened the distance between them. He swung his hand. In his hand, 3 folding knives suddenly flew out, circling in the air, and flew toward Huaishi like butterflies. White speed was the most terrifying. If not for the help of the realm of nothingness, Huaishi would not have had any time to react. The power of the black folding knife was not like such a short blade at all. Instead, it was like some kind of mountain-splitting knife. Every time, it could shake Huaishi's posture. The green folding knife's trajectory was erratic, and it was impossible to see where it was at all. It was always hidden in Huaishi's blind spot, ready to be launched. Ning can also wield a sword. Huaishi was dumbfounded. He had never seen such a strange border relic. It could even be seized. Ding Nank took advantage of Huaishi's confusion to launch another fierce attack. He clearly had nothing in his hands, but the premonition of death kept warning Huaishi. He must not let him touch him. But as if he could see Huaishi's fear, his attacks suddenly became more unscrupulous. Huaishi's back was even heavily slashed by the black folding knife, leaving a tragic wound. Then it quickly healed. For a mountain ghost, this degree of injury was no different from playing around. However, Huaishi was enraged. "Do you think you're the only one who knows how to seize things?" The young man roared, "Watch my 1 chi into 3 pure ones." As he spoke, Huaishi's body suddenly swayed, and 2 puppets jumped out. Including himself, there were 3 puppets. At first glance, they looked like a group of idols from hell. They were extremely impressive. To save face, Huaishi did not hesitate to throw the 2 submachine guns to the dancing puppets. Then he suddenly flew up and kicked Chi Wen's back, sending him flying straight toward Ding Nank. Go! As if he had thrown out some amazing Pokemon, Huai Shi shouted excitedly. Strange weapons, two-legged bronze men. Ding Nank was stunned. What kind of King move was this? How could this person stab his own army in the back? When such a bizarre and despicable act appeared in front of him, even Ding Nank's long-extinguished righteous heart could not help but be filled with righteous indignation. Chapter 385. Even the inhumane border smugglers were stunned by Huai Shi's shameless actions. Damn it, why you have to hurt the innocent young old people? Although he intended to complain in his heart, he didn't hesitate in the slightest. The invisible object in his hand chopped down decisively, splitting Chi Wen from the top of his head to the bottom of his crotch, cleanly cutting him in two. But as the Ean's soul turned into ashes, he also disappeared along with it. Without any warning, it was as if he had evaporated. But the folding knife still whistled in the air, becoming fiercer and fiercer. Huai Shi was stunned for a moment, then immediately felt the murderous intent coming at him. Subconsciously, he raised his right hand and clenched it into a fist. Endless gray exploded, and the gray nightmare fog spread out in all directions. It actually outlined a fleeting shadow in the empty air. It was close at hand. Huai Shi raised the blade of his sword and blocked without thinking. But it was too late. He only felt a sharp pain coming from his wrist. An invisible folding knife swept across his wrist, cutting open his artery and leaving deep slash marks on his bones. Blood spurted out and fell into the air. A sinister smile appeared on his face. Ding Nank happily stuck out his tongue and licked it. He was about to praise Huai Shi's blood for tasting good when he felt that something was wrong. This blood was poisonous. He didn't have time to speak. He staggered back and coughed violently, spitting out clumps of dark green congealed blood from his lungs and mouth. His face was deathly pale. Border flu, abyss plague, hell's black death, red eye, spirit boiling mushroom. In an instant, countless strains of hell spread out from Huai Shi's blood and grew vigorously in his fertile field. Even though he had hurriedly swallowed an entire bottle of antidote, he still felt waves of stabbing pain spreading from his lungs. Despicable. How much poison did you put in your blood? He looked at Huai Shi with an increasingly indignant gaze. His figure disappeared without a trace again. Following the attack of the three revolving folding knives, he once again approached Huai Shi silently. Then he saw Huai Shi snap his fingers in disdain. The red gloves picked up the submachine gun and wildly fired in front of him. Huai Shi, who was hiding behind the tool man, raised his rapidly healing arm, took out a fist-sized metal ball from his backpack, and threw it forward. Ramses' wrath. In the next instant, seething flames, accompanied by the ignition of source flame, emerged and erupted. The viscous liquid metal fuel poured down like a storm, instantly turning the entire hall into a scorching hot field of fire. In the raging fire, countless ashes danced to form the outline of a startled figure. Huai Shi had already stepped forward. You know how to make yourself invisible. Huai Shi's success. Then he raised his hand and performed the Orchard Sect's exclusive invisibility spell in front of Ding Nank. Simple, fast, and convenient. There was absolutely no way to break it. The specific process was to first raise your hand, then circle your thumb, ring finger, and pinky finger, straighten your index finger and middle finger, maintain a forked angle, and then aim at the opponent's eyes. Activate the drummer. Bang! Bang! With a crisp shattering sound, Ding Nank screamed. He personally experienced the terror of the orchard zzz. He could no longer see where Huai Shi was. Forever. Huai Shi swung his sword, knocking away the folding knife stabbing at him from behind. Then, he threw his sword into the air. A sacrificial knife appeared between his fingers and slashed at Ding Nank's shoulder. It swept past. Ding Nank's arm flew from his shoulder. The axe of wrath swept across and cleanly cut off his legs. In the end, Huai Shi caught the falling sword of virtue with a backhand and cut off his other arm from his body. He then nailed him to the ground. Victory and defeat had been decided. Most importantly, after losing Ding Nank's source, the invisible folding knife and 3 other folding knives fell to the ground. Huaisher quickly put them into his pocket. This was a rare border relic, and it was a set. It was definitely worth a lot of money. As if sensing Huaisher's joy, Qi Wan, who had just regained a bit of consciousness in the Nibelungen ring, sent a message to Huaisher. There should be a hidden mezzanine upstairs. HM? Huaisher was surprised. How do you know? The secret door in the monitoring room is double-layered. I've used a similar design before, specifically used to hide important items. Okay, so there was a resonance between the forces of evil. Huaisher couldn't help but sneer. He immediately waved his hand. This kind of thing will cause endless trouble if it gets out, so let me help everyone seal it. Hurry up, how do we go? Quickly point the way. As he spoke, Huaisher used a rope of sorrow to tie up Ding Nank on the ground and threw him to the suppression team that had rushed in. Then he ran upstairs. Before going upstairs, he kindly reminded them, "There's danger upstairs. Be careful, don't go near." The suppression team immediately acted as if they were facing a great enemy. No one expected that as soon as they went upstairs, Huaisher's expression would change. He rubbed his hands together expectantly. Every dog has its day. After being an inspector for so long, it's finally my turn to do evil. Cough, cough, that's not right. The Astronomy Association collects stolen goods. How is that called doing evil? Of course, Huaisher would definitely hand over the important items. But if it was just some dirt, well, then he would leave it to himself, who wasn't afraid of being dirty and tired, to deal with it. Luckily, he had a bottomless pit at home. Recently, he had been so poor that he could dig out a 50-cent coin from the ground, wash it, and bring it home. Based on the speed at which Crow was spending money, if he didn't make more money, he would go bankrupt in 2 years. Thinking of this, his movements became even faster. Very quickly, under Qi Wen's guidance, Huaisher directly smashed the wall and the steel plates of the vault. Behind the wall, a sealed space about 2 square meters in size was revealed. Obviously, there had been even more high-end verification equipment, but no matter how high-end the verification equipment and alloy safe were, they couldn't withstand Huaisher's confinement hand. Huaisher's small hand touched it, and directly used alchemy fire to forge a seam in the alloy lock. He didn't even need to open it, and it opened with a gentle pull. Then, his eyes were lit up by a bright golden light. 10 minutes later, Huaisher walked down from upstairs, exhausted. It was as if he had gone through a great battle, and every step was difficult. He waved at the suppression team downstairs. "I've already solved the problem. You can go up now." Under the admiring gazes of his brothers, Huaisher walked out of the door with heavy footsteps. He wasn't afraid of others noticing anything unusual. The safe had long been destroyed by Huaisher. Why was the confinement hand so useful in breaking the law? Then at the door, he saw the person he was most afraid of now, Director Fu. At this moment, old Fu's iconic pair of large eyes swept over Huaisher, causing Huaisher's expression to become sluggish. He subconsciously felt a little uneasy. What's wrong? Unexpectedly, the corners of old Fu's eyes twitched. He didn't see through Huaisher's guilty conscience. After a long while, he said in a low voice, "Ding Nank is dead." This was too embarrassing. He didn't even want to say it out loud. He had spent a lot of effort to remove a stick and capture the criminal alive. He had even tied him up like a crab and sent him to you. In the end, he was fine in Huaisher's hands, but died when he came to him. In particular, this highlighted his incompetence, which made him even more irritable. On the other hand, Huaisher couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Old Fu actually didn't notice his filthy illegal behavior, and Ding Nank was also dead. Didn't that mean no one would know that he had embezzled it? This is great. He couldn't help but blurt out, "What?" Old Fu was stunned and looked over. "Ahem, I mean this is too much. Let me take a look at the scene." Huaisher quickly straightened his face and walked in the direction of the prisoner's van. Soon he saw the mess on the ground. There were scattered ashes everywhere. From the video, there was no violation of the rules. Everything was carried out according to procedure. However, before the anesthetic was injected, Ding Nank began to struggle with all his might. His lips opened and closed, and he said something silently. Then he grinned. Then a dark green flame rose from his body. Everything he had was burned to ashes. However, it didn't burn the chair cushion or the stretcher. It only left a black mark on the bloody white cloth. What did he say in the end? Huaishir was at a loss. The person who could read lips stared at the video for a long time and was also in disbelief. You'll never know why. The staff repeated Ding Nank's words before he died. Forever. It was expected that he would commit suicide for fear of punishment. However, Huaishir felt that the other party could have escaped, but he ran back in the end. It was a little suspicious that he deliberately sent himself to death. It was as if he deliberately wanted to cut off some clues. He was afraid that he would reveal even the slightest trace and attract anyone's attention. What was he trying to hide? He smelled the scent of a conspiracy. But what did this have to do with him, a cold-hearted inspector? Anyway, it was a case handed over by the Border Administration. The Astronomical Society and the Social Security Bureau jointly cracked down on smuggling at the border. Originally, he didn't expect there to be so many messy things. It was just an ordinary smuggling sweep. Even if there were any accidents, it should be the people at the border who reported the situation here to worry about it. Huaishir had already mastered the skill of throwing the blame to survive in a large organization. He would obediently be his own salary thief and not care about anything that didn't concern him. That's right. He had matured. He was no longer the naive teenager of the past. If he could, he wanted to bring goji berries to work every day. He wanted to drink a cup of tea, smoke a cigarette, and read a newspaper for the entire day. He wanted to paddle into the trench and feel the fish thoroughly. One ideal life. Now, Huaishir had already begun to think about how to write the report. Otherwise, it would be a waste of his high copywriting skills. Unfortunately, there was nothing to say. It was nothing more than, if the criminals came, he would kill them with one shot. In the end, he decided to copy Old Fu's plan. After all, Old Fu couldn't do anything about it. The joy of being an inspector was so boring and simple. From the beginning to the end, Director Fu felt that something was not right. He always felt that Huaishir looked like a sneaky dog. However, when he saw Yi Zichen stumbling and heavily injured, he couldn't help but feel guilty. He wondered if he had been too strict with Yi Zichen. Moreover, it was too difficult to ride a bicycle back with injuries. He might as well just send him a car. Just like this, after sending Huaishir off, Old Fu sat there smoking. His heart was getting more and more suffocated. After a tiring day, he still had to continue to fight with a stupid dog at night to maintain his position as the head of the family. He couldn't help but feel sad. Was life always so painful, or was it only like this in middle age? It's so hard. Under the sympathetic gaze of his subordinates, Director Fu sighed sadly for the 32nd time today. Into the second update. Chapter 386. It's so heavy, I can't carry it at all. Huaishir panted as he walked on the mountain road. He felt the heavy load in the saddlebag. As a divine artifact, the functions of the Wise One survival bag were certainly not limited to the civilian version of Doraemon's universal toolkit. Moreover, it also had the storage ability similar to a space ring. It wasn't big, about 2 cubic meters, just enough to fit all the tools and food and water supplies needed by an archaeological team member. Even though the design looked old and the style and material were not eye-catching, there was no doubt that it could bring extensive and huge help to the sublimator. The only problem was that although things could be stuffed in, it wouldn't be free of any weight. Yes, the weight of the things you put in would be the same as the weight of the things you put in. Furthermore, the center of gravity was on one side, so it was extremely difficult for him to walk. If he walked for a long time, he might even fall over. As for the special ability of this divine artifact, after 2 studies, Huaishir had more or less learned some things. Although the effect was random and uncontrollable, there was still a certain trick to it. The most important thing was that when using it, you must have a clear understanding of your own situation and have a complete and feasible plan in order to maximize its effect. If you were in a difficult situation and your mind was blank, the things you took out from the backpack. That would be interesting. After all, there was more than one solution to a problem. Even if the things you took out would inevitably help the situation, the help could be big or small. For example, after Huaisher fell into a ditch, if he only hoped that this magical backpack could save him, then it was very likely that he would take out a ladder that was not long enough, or a disposable phone that could not be used at all in areas with poor signal. If it was even worse, he might have taken out a bottle of spray-on powder from inside. Only after clearly understanding the situation would he know whether he needed to call for help or save himself. What he needed was a phone, a ladder, a longer rope, or a pistol with a signal flare. After all, there was only one chance, and the cool-down time was 2 weeks, which was half a month. If he had to wait for the next opportunity, it would be too late. Most of the time, for Huaisher, this ability that was too random was not as useful as its storage function. For example, when you planned to take advantage of the situation, carrying the heavy saddlebag, Huaisher felt a beautiful hope rise in his heart. He continued to push forward on the mountain path, bypassing the main road and approaching the Chalcedony Hall step by step. Then, he climbed over the wall and entered. When he landed, he saw Feng Shu looking at him from behind the window. The old man thought that a thief had broken in, so he held a double-barreled shotgun with a disdainful expression. When he realized that the person who had climbed over the wall was his young master, he was stunned and puzzled. Why didn't they go through the front door? Of course, it was because there was a metal-swallowing beast at the entrance. It was one thing for Huaisher to be a backstabber, but she had already stepped into the realm of Russian dolls. She was capable of backstabbing others. If she found out that he had returned from raiding their properties, there would be consequences. Huaisher hurriedly raised his finger and shushed him. Then he pointed in the direction of the basement, his expression urgent. Feng Shu turned around to take a look, then gestured to his young master that it was safe. Then, Huaisher let out a sigh of relief. He tiptoed to the back of the house and swung the sorrowful rope, pulling him up to the 3rd floor. After the confining hand opened the window, he climbed in and closed the window. He let out a long sigh of relief. He couldn't help but smile excitedly. He rubbed his hands together. Because of the short amount of time, he hadn't carefully looked at what was inside the safe. After confirming that it was a precious item, he had stuffed it into his bag. Now, he could finally take a proper inventory. 10 minutes later, Huaisher wiped his sweat and looked at the small mountain of shiny metal on the bed. He still couldn't believe it and wondered if he was dreaming. Oh my, so much pure gold? Pure gold was a gold-like metal created through alchemy. Although it had the same nature as gold, it had a good fusion rate with origin substances. All along, it had been used as a general material for alchemy. It was widely loved and popular, and the demand for it was huge. Other than the fact that its cost was 3 times higher than normal gold, it had no other shortcomings. Because of this, it could be considered a hard currency at the border. It was easier to circulate and use than origin substance crystals, which could easily cost millions or even tens of millions. It was deeply loved by criminals. Looking at the imprint on it, it was actually the alchemy symbol of the Cavendish workshop. In other words, this batch of pure gold was all produced by the smelting center of the Cavendish workshop. As the workshop with the best quality control and mass production, no, it should be called a giant monopoly. The Cavendish workshop not only exported a large number of products, but also accepted various batches of business in the industry, such as OEM, extraction, purification, and so on. It was also one of the largest raw material suppliers in the world. Since it could be stamped with the Cavendish Workshop's symbol, it proved that the purity of this batch of pure gold was above 99%. It was no wonder that such a small pile was so heavy. According to the tradition of the Cavendish Workshop, in its undivided state, each piece of pure gold should weigh exactly 5 kilograms. It should be enough to support a standard large-scale alchemy operation. Then, the 51 pieces here should be 255 kilograms. After checking the exchange rate of pure gold today and obtaining a price of $5,700 per ounce, he began to calculate. Huaisher's hands trembled as he pressed on the computer for a long time, but he still couldn't calculate it. Just as he was getting anxious, he heard a voice behind him. It's about 51,000 and 270,000 US dollars. In East Summer dollars, it's about 250 million. Oh, so that's how it is. Huaishir let out a long breath. He could no longer contain his surprise. He was about to express his thanks when he realized who had spoken. His smile froze on his face. It disappeared bit by bit. He turned around and saw Crow, who had landed on his shoulder at some point. She was also looking at Huaishir. Her watery eyes blinked as she asked curiously, "My wings are clean. Can I touch your pure gold?" "No, go away." Huaishir subconsciously threw himself on the pure gold and glared at Crow. "Come at me if you have any problems. Don't hurt my money." How did this woman know that I was back? And she had so accurately found where I was hiding the money. Young man, women are very sensitive about their private stash of money. Crow whistled happily. It's just like the hair on a man's shoulder, the red mark on his neck, and the perfume on his body. Just by smelling it, you can smell the scent of money. So let me touch it. It's not like I'll lose money by touching it. I don't know if it'll be less if others touch it, but after you touch it, it'll be at least half of it. Huaishir widened his eyes. I worked hard to earn this money. Can you earn money by cheating others? I'm doing justice for the heavens. 200 million USD is nothing. You can't even buy a new fighter jet, and you can only buy a castrated version. Crow looked at his idiot sympathetically, shook his head, and sighed. If you really want to talk about expensive, pure gold is the cheapest here. Do you see that little box you threw to the side? It's full of origin substance fragments, crystals formed by forcibly compressing them through the depths of hell. They're lighter than plastic and almost have no mass, but the market price is more than 15 times that of ordinary origin substance crystals. According to a preliminary estimate, it's around 90 million USD. Huaishir was dumbstruck. That's amazing. Also, Ding Nang's 4 folding knives have the Clover Workshop logo on them. 4 in a set, each with different effects. The whole set can be rated as an S-rank border relic. Crow assessed, it doesn't suit you, and you don't lack these weapons. If you choose to resell it, the auction price will be around 80 to 120 million. Huaishir sucked in a breath of cold air. He didn't feel that this price was outrageous. After all, once something was stained with an ascendant or a border relic, then there was only one word to describe it: expensive. It was like how the price of ordinary tool pliers would generally double when they became model-specific pliers. Most ascendants didn't lack money, but they also lacked money more than everyone else. Originally, the unlucky Naga that Huaishir had hacked to death by Qi when side cost more than 20 million USD to buy 4 curved knives. Moreover, he had to rely on his membership in the Theravada Tantra to buy them. Selling these 4 folding knives for this price was already a conservative estimate. If Huaishir was willing to sell the Sword of Virtue, the price would only be even more exaggerated. It was just that Huaishir had never thought of doing so. The hopes and expectations placed on them were simply too precious. It wasn't something that could be bought with money. After doing a preliminary inventory of his haul, Huaishir was shocked. For 500 million USD, that was too exaggerated. Crow shook his head. This price is inflated. At least a third of it is tax. Otherwise, no one would smuggle. Huaishir didn't understand, but how can a group of smugglers be so rich? It's because you're lucky that you got a big order from them, okay? Crow rolled his eyes. A group of delivery men who are ready to run away at any time. Even if they have money, they would only deposit it in the magic gold bank. Why would they change it to something so troublesome? In other words, well, you're swallowing all the stolen goods. Huaishir's expression twitched. It's just that with such a large quantity of goods, I'm afraid there aren't many people who can buy it. Crow sighed, and you have no experience in selling stolen goods. If you sell it rashly, you'll definitely be targeted by the large border organization that suffered a loss. Then, you'll get into trouble. I don't think I need to say more, right? Huaishir rolled his eyes. Can't I wait for the limelight to blow over and slowly sell it? Do you have time for that? Crow reminded. Don't forget, you have to advance within half a year. Young man, if you wait until everything calms down and you make a move, it'll be too late. She paused for a moment, and her tone became soft and enthusiastic. And it just so happens that there's an experienced, generous, helpful, and trustworthy friend next to you who can help you solve this small problem. As she spoke, she blinked, leaned closer, and looked at Huaishur. Guess who this good person is? Chapter 387. The person you're talking about, Huaishur thought for a moment before asking with some uncertainty. It can't be Big Cousin, right? Crow rolled her eyes. Big cousin my ass. In your heart. I can't even compare to a stinky man. Hee hee. Huaishur laughed coldly and looked at Crow, who had revealed her true colors. Waiting for me here? Is that right? It's fine if you want my body, but you also want my money. Crow clicked her tongue and said straightforwardly, I'll help you dispose of the pure gold. We'll split it 30 to 70. Is that okay? As soon as she finished speaking, Huaishur felt that something was wrong. He frowned. I'll take 70 and you'll take 30? Okay. Crow nodded. Then it's a deal. Huaishur's expression twitched again. He had been dragged into this trap by this woman again. Without waiting for him to react, Crow continued. Give me half of that box of origin substance fragments, and I'll help you solve the problem of the blood vengeance crystal. I'll also help you solve the problem of the Lin clan, so you won't have any more worries. That's fine too. Huaishur hesitated for a long time before nodding his head. Logically speaking, the blood vengeance crystal should be the easiest to obtain out of the four materials, but Huaishur had thoroughly offended the Lin clan, the largest producer of the Eastern Summer Country's origin substance. Not only had he offended them, but he had also almost played out some unspeakable scenes on the live broadcast. The Lin clan's people were famous for holding grudges. Even though he said that he wasn't afraid, it was quite tiring to always be on guard against a woman coming to his door and telling him that life was full of ups and downs. Well, that was only if she had the courage to do so. Even though Crow's words weren't reliable, she had never failed to keep her promises. Now that she had spoken, the blood vengeance crystal had been taken care of. That meant that half of the four precious materials Huaishur needed to advance. Blood vengeance crystal, divine light of grace, ashes of evil, and undying flames had been taken care of. But the remaining half was confusing. The rarely seen undying flame and the evil creature ashes that was firmly controlled by the Continuation Academy. One relied on luck, while the other relied on connections. Neither could be dealt with in a short period of time. Although the former wasn't expensive, it was hard to find. Who knew when it would appear? The latter wasn't hard to find, but why would someone sell something that didn't sound like anything good to him? The Continuation Institute itself was a prison, laboratory, and safekeeping organization used to seal and research all kinds of dangerous objects and creatures. If Huaishur's identity wasn't enough, or if he didn't have any official reason, it was absolutely impossible for him to get these things from them. There was a formal reason. Huaishur only needed to say that he wanted to advance, and they would understand. Well, I also found out that this grandson of mine has mastered the secret of the top-tier version of the Heaven's Inquisition Road through an unknown channel. Then, I thought about it for a bit. Well, little brother, do you have a friend who has some relationship with the Golden Dawn? Come, have a cup of tea, and we'll talk about it in detail. In the end, Huaishur could only rely on himself. He could not help but let out a long sigh. Is life always so difficult? Or is it only when one advances? But I do have a way. The crow blinked its big, innocent eyes and jumped in front of him. I can point out the maze for you and find a bright path. Huaishur was alert. What are you up to now? Wow, you're so guarded against your kind big sister. It really makes people's hearts cold, young man. The crow sighed. I'm planning for you with all my heart. As it spoke, 2 drops of disappointed tears fell from its sad face. Before you cry, hide the eye drops under your wings. The effect will be better. Huaishur kindly reminded him before letting out a long sigh. Forget it. Do you think I won't jump into a trap if there's one? Just say it. Hey, this time it's not that big sister deliberately tricked you. The crow rummaged in the pocket of its mini sweater and then pinched a piece of paper with the tip of its wings and unfolded it in front of Huaishur. Huaishur leaned over, narrowed his eyes, and read the words on the paper word by word. Big Li Nan Fong? Yes, that's right. Big Li Nan. The crow's expression instantly became cartoonish and said with exultation, A few days ago, Big Sister specially did a divination for you. Although I haven't practiced it for many years, after a dozen times, I finally got a result. This is it. The corners of Huai Shi's eyes couldn't help but twitch. Hey, don't mess around with my soul's real name and birthday. Even if Huai Shi didn't know anything about divination, he knew that repeatedly divining the same question was absolutely a taboo. Even the mystic bird, who was known as the master of destiny, would never divine the same question twice. At the end of the day, divination was to pry into the mysteries of fate. It was like throwing a stone into the darkness to listen for an echo. In all likelihood, it wouldn't have any effect, but if it could be seen even a little bit, it would be worth it. But divination itself would cause disturbances to a person's fate, especially for a mysterious existence like the crow, who had a transcendent position. Her rough divination was equivalent to grabbing Huai Shi's fate line and pulling it 17 or 18 times in a row. Even if there was a result, the process in the middle would most likely be unrecognizable, and it might even have a considerable negative impact. Who knew what would be the idea of something, or what kind of damned thing he would be entangled in? If he was unlucky, he would be smashed to death by a meteorite, and thousands of years later, his ashes might be made into a border relic related to the young arbiter of life. Don't worry, trust me. The crow raised its wings and patted him on the shoulder. I do this all the time, and you're still alive now, aren't you? Huai Shi rolled his eyes and didn't want to talk to her anymore. Then I promise that I won't do anything behind your back anymore, okay? Okay. The crow said, and I didn't do it on purpose tone. She almost turned into her human form and grabbed Huai Shi's sleeve to apologize pitifully. But before she really did that, Huai Shi stopped her. He couldn't take it. For the sake of his heart, he didn't want to argue with her about this. So, if I want to level up quickly, I have to go south. Huai Shi rubbed his chin and looked at the note. Then you have to make it clear where I'm going, right? South of Xanhai was Jinhua. South of Jinhua was Fuzhou. South of Fuzhou was Yuezhou. And then out of the border. Or did it mean that he had to go to Myanmar? Or even further, Siam? Even if it was the south, he still had to figure out which direction to go. You don't have to worry about this. I've already arranged it. The crow took out a black card from her small bag and handed it to Huai Shi. The Star Luxury Travel Train, a 4-day, 3-night trip. Choose the star, choose nobility. Hurry up and embark on an unforgettable journey that you will never regret. What the hell? Huai Shi was confused and didn't know what she was talking about. Holding the black card and looking at it twice, he finally confirmed that it seemed to be a ride card with a star imprinted on it. The design was simple and elegant, and the gilded logo was unforgettable. On the back, there was a very modern QR code. After scanning the QR code, a page automatically popped up. It was an introduction to a luxurious train called the Star, which looked rather contemporary. Be it the old-fashioned black locomotive or the exquisite furnishings and decorations in the private compartments of the train, they all made one feel a strong sense of style from the past. There was a more detailed introduction below, such as the precious creation of the star that was created by a guru-level alchemist with the help of many alchemists, and how unique it was, and how thoughtful and luxurious the internal food and drinks were. The most important thing was that now that it had been revised, it had embarked on a new journey again. It would follow a new route, and within 4 days and 3 nights, it would take passengers to shuttle between the present realm and various borders, allowing them to enjoy the spectacular scenery of hell, and let the guests enjoy this unique and wonderful journey. Huai Shi's eyes widened, and he almost broke down. Isn't this just a F***King tour group? It's a luxury tour group. The crow corrected. 4 days and 3 nights will cost $3 million. Huai Shi sneered and shook his head. Who would spend $3 million on this thing? Of course. The crow raised his wings and pointed at him. For example, you. I won't. Huai Shi habitually refused. Although he knew that it was useless, he just didn't want to spend any money on this damn thing. Even if I don't have a car, I'll carry my own luggage and walk all the way to Siam. I won't take this damn thing. But this train will stop at the permanent neutral border, Shambhala, and all the guests will get a VIP invitation to an auction, the crow said calmly. In this auction, there's a high probability that something like the ashes of the evil creature will appear, and there will definitely be undying flames. Well, you can also sell these folding knives. Really? Really? In the silence, Huaishir gritted his teeth and didn't speak. After a long time, he finally sighed helplessly. I'm so fragrant, okay? I'm scared of you. You just want me to go here and buy the things back? No wonder this black-hearted woman didn't take away all my money. She kept the money for herself so that he could run errands for the auction. Don't worry, I'll go with you. Crow leaned over, her voice becoming sweet and charming as she whispered in his ear. Going on a 4-day and 3-night sweet trip with a beautiful and cute big sister, and sleeping in the same room at night? Isn't it exciting? Isn't it exciting? Maybe some embarrassing things will happen. Huaishir rolled his eyes. Lying on the bed, he didn't want to talk to her anymore. Chapter 388. Awesome. In the evening, Huaishir scrutinized the notice posted outside the waiting room and was dumbfounded. Even the luxury train will be late. It's just late. It's not an explosion. There are bound to be things that no one wants to happen. Crow, who was on his shoulder, said calmly, besides, if the train really had to leave on time, it would have left yesterday. How can you make it in time to buy a ticket today? To be honest, I have a hunch that this lousy train will really explode. Huaishir rubbed the space between his eyebrows, pushed the door open, and entered. Then he felt the strange atmosphere in the exclusive waiting hall of the Star. It was completely different from what he had expected. There was no warm atmosphere, no relaxed chatter, and no scene of a family of 3 traveling together happily. There was only coldness and solemnity as they guarded against each other. What's going on? Huaishir's face twitched, and he froze at the door. 12 hours ago, after unhappily deciding on this impromptu sweet trip, Huaishir took out his mobile phone and applied for leave on the internal application of the Astronomical Society. At the same time, he also saw his poor attendance rate. If his salary could be deducted, then his salary for the next year would be deducted. However, Huaishir didn't care. Who asked him to have so much pure gold in his pocket? He was rich. To his surprise, the leave was approved very quickly. This time, the Jinling administration was exceptionally generous. Even though Huaishir had casually filled in the excuse of a border trip, they still gave him a full 10 days. Could it be that they had considered the fact that Huaishir had just risked his life to complete a big task, and thus specially gave him a leave of absence? Thinking about it this way, the Astronomical Society was not as heartless as he thought. Occasionally, they would sympathize with the low-level employees. However, not long after, Chai Fei, who was far away in Jinling, sent him the coordinates of a restaurant on WeChat. She also attached a smiling emoji and asked him, "Can you ask the kind-hearted person who approved your leave for a sponsor partnership?" The corners of Huaishir's mouth twitched. Then, "Can you please return my gratitude to the organization just now?" Most of Huaishir's impression of the Jinling branch came from AI Qing, who claimed to be her best friend, but AI Qing never acknowledged her as her best friend. The main reason was that this big sister's skill in skiving was simply too high, and from the bottom of their hearts, they respected her as the strongest. Not only could he slack off, but he could also bring others along with him. It was just like running a dungeon. He was just short of starting a slacking training class and becoming the little helper of every group to slack off. Most importantly, he was easy to talk to. As long as he treated her to a meal, all the procedures would be easily settled. The restaurant she sent was not expensive per person, but the heat from the pictures made Huaishir's eyes twitch wildly. All right, Chai Fei wasn't even afraid, so why was he worried for her? After the takeout was sold, he successfully received an increase in Chai Fei's favorability towards him. He also received an occasional tip. The end of the year is the month of statistics, and the accountants in the bureau will have to work overtime for a long time. And before that, please remember to quickly spend this year's budget. Thus, Huaishir unceremoniously used public funds to book the rest of the trip. His movements were skillful and fast, without the slightest hesitation. It was not until after the booking that he noticed the strange gaze of Crow next to him. "Yes, what's wrong?" "No, I'm just wondering." Crow shook his head and sighed. Where did the refreshing and upright young man go? Let me think. He was probably angered to death by a crow. Huaisher rolled his eyes and looked at her. "We are also looking for the criminal. Do you have any clues?" "I don't see him." "Maybe you're looking in the wrong place." "Is that so?" Yes. Thus, the night passed without a word. The next day, Huaisher got up early in the morning, picked up his luggage, and began his day-long journey. First, he took a train to the train station, then the high-speed train to Jinling. Then he took a special underground line in Jinling to the nearest public border, Stone City. Yes, it was the place where Huaisher decided to run away with his boss. As a large, open border, Stone City's internal development was quite advanced, and there were many things in the discovery realm. At the same time, the location was also within the range of the big secret, so safety and order were guaranteed. After years of continuous immigration, the population had successfully exceeded 300,000 and could almost be regarded as a peripheral town of Jinling. Although a small number of ordinary people who came to the border would have a period of time when they were not acclimatized. But after so many years, no matter what the situation was, there were already measures and plans to deal with it. Nothing major would happen, and they would be able to adapt in about a week. Therefore, the streets were full of people coming and going, and it looked very lively. It was not much different from the Discovery Realm. The most obvious difference was the endless sea that was always gray and gloomy above his head, right? Huaisher stood at the entrance and looked up at the distant waves and sails above his head. The absurd illusion of heaven and earth being upside down made him feel a little lightheaded. No matter how many times he saw it, he could not adapt. Will it really not collapse? Huaisher could not help but scratch his chin. He was full of worry. Although it's a bit of groundless fear, you may not have figured out that this is no longer the Discovery Realm. In the framework here, the phenomenon of gravity is just a set of values. Do you understand? Yes, even if you can see the endless sea above your head, this is just the relative position shown in the passage frame. It does exist there, as a medium formed by the change of depth between all the borders of the Asian region, but this is just a phenomenon. Even if it collapses one day, it will not hit this border. Even if it does, as long as the gravity value is adjusted, it can be easily bounced away. Crow explained, moreover, the benefits of its existence outweigh the disadvantages. Thanks to the existence of this thing, there are routes and flights between the various borders. Just like the underground highways in Europe, the sky zip line in America, and a huge land city of the Russian Federation that can be used in the Iron Rain. Seeing that Huaisher was still puzzled, she could not help but shake her head. You can just treat it as a background setting, just like the dynamic maps in the game. Don't think too much about it. Huaisher suddenly realized. You should have said so earlier. No, I just didn't expect my contractor to be so uncultured, Crow sighed. She deeply felt that her life as a bird was not easy. Unfortunately, due to the lack of time, there was no chance to experience the customs of the border in detail. After taking a quick look, Huaisher took a taxi to the ride point mentioned on the card, which was a very old-looking station. The journey was unimpeded, and there was not even a ticket checker. According to Crow's analysis, even the station itself was a projection of the border, like a mirage existing between reality and illusion. If one didn't have a ticket, they wouldn't even be able to see the station, let alone enter. After Huaisher entered the station, the first thing he saw was the super unprofessional late notice. Although Huaisher was able to get on the train because of it, as a distinguished customer who spent money, it was inevitable that he would be unhappy to see this notice. Too unprofessional. You have to think positively. Crow whispered in his ear. It's better than a limited event, right? Huaisher was dumbfounded. Are these things all limited and free of charge? Of course, the operating company also needs to earn money. Well, it's better to say that Aeon Investment is not short of money, and this kind of thing happens occasionally. Let the vast majority of passengers who used to lie on the roof also feel the charm of the luxury train. And there are guest books that can never be seen anywhere else and enjoy an unprecedented ride experience. Although there will be a lot of average comments in the review section, it will make people feel that the faster the better, the harder it is. You can't help it. I don't understand what you are talking about at all. Huaisher sighed and glanced at the strange atmosphere in the waiting room. And what is this situation? In the waiting room, it was solemn and cold. There was no soft atmosphere, and there was not even the slightest bit of cheerfulness when people went out for a trip. When Huaisher pushed the door open and entered, the people sitting on the chairs suddenly looked over, their calm expressions faintly containing vigilance. After seeing that the newcomer was just an unarmed teenager, most of them withdrew their gaze. The remaining small group of people looked at his face, as if they had seen it somewhere before. Soon, some of them withdrew their gaze as if they had been electrocuted, and a few of them became more and more vigilant. It was as if they regarded Huaisher as a potential enemy. Most of the people who were traveling with him hated him as soon as he entered the door. Huaisher was confused. What the hell was going on? Are you not aware of how famous you are? Crow shook his head. For someone like you who has an organization, a unit, insurance, and a fixed annual leave every year, a double year-end salary, and an extra year-end bonus. You are also a lackey of the Astronomy Society who has been on TV before. Everyone has the right to punish you, okay? After Huaisher heard this, he felt that this group of people's hatred was F***king reasonable. He wanted to hit himself a little. Anyway, find a seat first. Crow withdrew his gaze. In a few minutes, the bus will be here. I will explain it to you when we get on the bus. Huaisher looked around. He found that most of the luxurious waiting room, which was decorated and displayed like a cafe, was already full of people, and Huaisher did not want to sit with those who were hostile to him. There was only one seat next to the table in the corner, but there was another person sitting there, his back facing Huaisher. He could only see a bowl of noodles in front of him and an old briefcase under the chair. He was wearing a gray suit that was not very high-end. He was also the only person who did not turn around when he heard Huaisher push the door open. He was completely focused on eating his noodles. It was as if he was enjoying something delicious. Huaisher walked over and asked softly, "Can I sit here?" The man who was eating the noodles slowly raised his head, causing Huaisher to suck in a breath of cold air. He was shocked. The greasy feeling that hit him in the face, the listless and numb breath, the pale face that seemed to be ready to die on the street at any time, and the eye-catching dark circles under his eyes. How many overtime hours did he work? He clearly did not look old, only 30 years old, but the roots of his hair were already showing signs of gray. "Big brother, where did you come from, you bastard from?" After seeing Huaisher, the other party seemed to be stunned for a moment. The man in the gray suit looked at the young man in front of him, and then looked at Crow on his shoulder. Soon, he politely pulled out a chair. "Both of you please sit." Even when he spoke, there was a lingering tiredness in his voice. Then he lowered his head and continued to eat his noodles. He ate attentively and sweetly, slowly tasting it, as if there was a peerless delicacy in front of him that could be eaten for 24 hours. Chapter 389. In fact, the bowl of noodles was quickly finished. Although he looked a bit like a social animal, he had an indescribable charm when he was eating. Even if she were to watch him eat, she would be able to empathize with him and experience the sweetness and contentment. After drinking the soup in one gulp, the man in the gray suit finally raised his head. He wiped his mouth, and a trace of redness appeared on his pale face. "I've been working overtime recently. I'm exhausted." He smiled at Huaisher embarrassedly. "Sorry about that. Are you going on a trip?" Huaisher's eyes twitched. Until now, he realized this man seemed to be able to see the crow, but the crow pretended that it was really a crow and did not know what he was talking about. It looked left and right and just ignored him. The man in the gray suit didn't say anything to her. Instead, he suggested to Huaisher, "There's still half an hour before the car starts. Do you want to have a bowl of noodles?" Huaisher was puzzled. The noodles here are pretty good. Although the soup is a bit ordinary, the noodles are handmade. It should be made with old noodles. The texture is completely different from a yeast, and it's very chewy. The side dishes are also, speaking of food, The man in the gray suit became happy, as if he was talking about the best thing in the world, and his eyebrows danced. After he finished speaking, Huaisher shook his head awkwardly. No, forget about that. I came after eating. Ah, that's a pity. The man in the gray suit shook his head regretfully. Then he remembered that he didn't greet him. Sorry, I haven't asked yet. What's your name? Huaisher. Nostalgic Huai. Huai as in Huaishu. Sure as in sure. Really? Why? Sure. The man inexplicably pondered for a while, as if he wanted to focus on memorizing the name. But after that, he didn't mention his name. He didn't know if it was intentional or if he forgot. While waiting for the bus, the two of them chatted casually. Soon, Huaisher found that the two actually got along very well. Even though it was the first time they had met, unexpectedly, there was no estrangement or distance between them. Instead, it was as if they were old friends who had not seen each other for a long time. Although this guy looked like a social animal who was about to die from working overtime, when he spoke, he always made people feel that he was sincere and happy. Huaisher could feel his salted fish soul resonating. It was like a strange setting that would only appear in comics. The slacker would always meet another slacker, and then everyone would happily exchange their experiences of slacking. Huaisher was too engrossed in the conversation. He was completely oblivious to the strange expressions on the faces of the other passengers. No one came to disturb their conversation. No, it should be said that he instinctively chose to stay away. Anyone with the slightest bit of intuition would be able to sense something. Apart from the haggard face of the man who was working overtime, there was also a gloomy atmosphere surrounding the man in the gray suit, as well as an ominous aura that seeped out from his bones. It sounded like someone was knocking on the door in the middle of the night. It made one's heart palpitate. It was too late to avoid it. Unconsciously, everyone was intentionally or unintentionally distancing themselves. In the end, it formed a clear boundary that even Huaisher was aware of. More than half of the waiting room was empty. What's going on? Huaisher looked at the strange appearance of those people in astonishment. He thought for a while, carefully analyzed, and then suddenly realized, was he being isolated? So abruptly, she encountered the legendary cold violence between people in society. Why? Had his reputation unknowingly become so bad outside? Or was it really like what Crow said, that the seals of the Astronomical Society should be killed by everyone? I'm a prince of the paradise. It's okay that I'm outdated, but you guys are too much to resist me like this. Ah, probably because of me. The man in the gray suit seemed to know what he was thinking and shrugged slightly. Most people don't like to deal with people like me. After all, I usually don't have any good intentions when I visit. Huh? Huaisher was curious. Are you some kind of killer? Although he felt that he shouldn't have any fighting power, one couldn't judge a book by its cover. It was said that this kind of setting was popular now. The seemingly inconspicuous courier brother was actually a retired soldier king who was walking on the road of saving the world with an internet cable. Even a middle school student could be reincarnated into a different world to become a Buddha. The world had changed. Everyone was not quite the same as what they appear to be. No, this is too exaggerated. The man in the gray suit shook his head awkwardly. You can see that I don't have any fighting power when you look at me like I'm going to die sooner or later. I'm a clerk. He paused for a moment, deliberating his words, and calmly said, in the past, I could still be regarded as your colleague, right? But after I resigned from the Astronomical Society and became unemployed, I was not very popular. I could only do odd jobs like delivering letters to make a living. These words were full of bitterness. Huaisher couldn't help but sympathize with him from the bottom of his heart. Actually, there's nothing good about the Astronomical Society now. He sighed. Even if I stay, I'll be a tool all day. If I'm unlucky enough to have a boss with a bad temper, I'll suffer even more. It's fine if I'm exhausted, but ever since the failure of the last expedition, my boss suddenly blacklisted me. Now, I feel like I've become an invisible person in the workplace. It's almost the new year, and I don't even have a ribbon fish. It's not easy to go out for a swim. Yes, it used to be like this. At the mention of this, the man in the gray suit sighed empathetically. When you joined the company, I told you that you would never work overtime and would be well paid. Only after you joined did you realize that you would never take a break. Every day, you would pour tea and water and run errands for others. The people above would casually throw tasks at you, and you couldn't finish writing reports every day. If you weren't careful, you would work overtime until the end of the world. At the end of the day, you still had to stand on the last shift with your boss. Now that I think about it, it's so miserable. How'd I get through it? Yes. Huaisher nodded from the bottom of his heart. In a moment of carelessness, the two of them had surprisingly reached a consensus in some wonderful aspects. This world was really wonderful. Happy times always passed very quickly, just like the limited activities of the ancient travel company in the past. If you weren't careful, it would end. A faint roar came from the railway outside the waiting room, and the sound of a steam whistle sounded. It gradually approached, and the train was about to enter the station. At this moment, the door of the waiting room opened again. Huaisher stiffened for a moment. He heard the illusory sound of wind and snow blowing from the door behind him, mixed with the low echo of an avalanche and an iceberg colliding. The cold wind was bone-chilling. But soon, as the door closed, the sudden chill dissipated. Only the low sound of footsteps sounded. Huaisher turned his head and saw two passengers walking in under the dim yellow light. No matter who it was, when they first looked over, their eyes would fall on the middle-aged man walking in front. As if he came from the country of ice and snow, the slightly old man was wearing a heavy coat. Even if there was not a single snowflake, one could still feel the coldness and hardships of the journey. There was no expression on his calm face, nor was he handsome or conspicuous. Only his pair of gray eyes were different from others. It was like a bonfire burning in a snowstorm, constantly rising with a vigorous flame. It was so cold that people couldn't look at it directly. The only imperfection might be the top of his head after he took off his hat. His smooth scalp was surrounded by sparse hair, reflecting the soft light on the ceiling. It was slightly awkward. Behind him, the young man who helped him carry his luggage didn't have any sense of presence. He followed behind him step by step, like a follower. But Huaisher always felt that the young man seemed to have seen him somewhere before. He looked strangely familiar, but he couldn't remember it for a while. Just as he was deep in thought, the man in front of him was already walking straight towards him, step by step. There was no hesitation or confusion. Finally, his footsteps stopped beside the table, and he nodded slightly to the man in the gray suit. Long time no see. He spoke in Latin, but with a hint of Russian Federation accent. It was hard to tell where he came from. Only after he walked closer, Huaisher finally realized that the man was very tall, at least 2 meters. He stood in front of the table with his back to the light, and his huge shadow covered the entire corner. It was like a big stone pressing on people's hearts, making it difficult to breathe. However, the man in the gray suit was not affected. His face was as usual, but it seemed that it was a little strenuous for him to raise his head and speak. Long time no see. It seems that it's you again this time? It shouldn't be. The dignified middle-aged man thought for a while and shook his head disdainfully. But even if it has nothing to do with me, it should be blamed on me in the end, right? The man in the gray suit nodded in agreement. After all, it's rare to see an unlikable person like you. During the conversation, the middle-aged man glanced at the young man next to him and seemed a little surprised. Your friend? We just met. The man in the gray suit shrugged. You don't have to think too much. He has nothing to do with a jinx like me. Is that so? The middle-aged man turned his head and looked at the young man sitting in the chair in front of him. Then let me give you a piece of advice, Mr. Huaisher. He called out Huaisher's name so abruptly. It was as if he had known him for a long time. He said, for the sake of the peaceful and happy life you're pursuing, it's best to stay away from the person next to you, and you should pray that this guy will never appear in front of you. It's not a good thing to be involved with him, just like being involved with the astronomy club. The advice came out of the blue, but the contempt in the words made Huaisher feel a burst of displeasure. It was as if he was reprimanding an ignorant child. So, in his shadow, Huaisher raised his head and looked at the dignified face. What a coincidence! The young man suddenly laughed, I also have a piece of advice. As he spoke, his hand reached into the saddlebag and grasped something heavy. Behind the middle-aged man, his follower's expression changed slightly. He wanted to step forward, but was stopped by the middle-aged man's raised hand. That person didn't care about Huaishi's hostility and actions. Instead, he waited with great interest to see what kind of weapon Huaishi could take out and what kind of killer move to challenge him. He was overestimating his own capabilities. In the end, a bundle of gift bags sealed in plastic film appeared in front of him, making him stare and freeze in place. Looking at his bald head, the young man suggested word by word, "You should try the new Overlord." Chapter 390. The cold wind came suddenly. It was as if there was a knife at the back. At that moment, the whole waiting hall seemed to be buried by an iceberg. Everyone felt that their consciousness was frozen by the sudden chill. Then, in the faint thunder that burst out in a trance, they felt dizzy and collapsed in their seats. Death came for no reason. Amidst the immense fear, even the screams froze in their hearts. Only coldness spread in their hearts, and the tyrannical sound of thunder reverberated in their souls. When they turned their heads stiffly in the cold, they saw the back of the figure standing in the corner. It was as if they were looking at death itself, and their eyes stung. They closed their eyes with difficulty. They felt the cold blood flowing from the corner of their eyes. It was just an illusion. It was just an illusion, but the injury at the moment was so real. Even the frozen and necrotic black spots quickly appeared on his hands and feet. The angry thunder echoed in the soul, and his consciousness became hazy. This was because the middle-aged man had raised his eyes slightly. That pair of gray eyes had mercilessly destroyed everything. Huaisher felt as if he was going to die again, but fortunately, he had already begun to get used to it. Only the premonition of death screamed crazily in the soul. The mirror of nothingness was dark, and nothing was reflected. It told him a simple and straightforward result. If he was the enemy of this person, then there was no possibility of any accident. Huaisher was dead. Under his gaze, the heavy burden was imposed on Huaisher's consciousness layer by layer, as if pressing his head and drowning him in the bottomless ice sea. He sank inch by inch. Death was getting closer and closer. From beginning to end, Huaisher didn't move, just looked at him. Achoo! The dead silence was suddenly broken. The man in the gray suit shivered and sneezed with a pale face. However, the illusion that could kill any spirit was suddenly dispelled. "Sorry, do you have tissue?" He rubbed his nose awkwardly, raised his head, and looked at the middle-aged man. Until the middle-aged man waved his hand, the attendant behind him came forward, took out a pack of tissue from his pocket, and handed it to him. "Thank you so much." The man in the gray suit blew his nose in surprise and let out a long breath. "There's no need to make such a fuss. Gray robe man, do you think I would bully a child?" The middle-aged man glanced at him mockingly before looking at Huaisher. "I was only going to punish you lightly, but you didn't pee your pants out of fear. You have some guts." As he spoke, he reached out and picked up the shampoo gift box on the table. After weighing in his hand, he revealed a strange smile. "After so many years, this is the first time I've received a gift from someone from the Astronomy Society. No, just treat it as a temporary ransom for letting you go. Put away the reviews." As he spoke, he threw the box to the attendant behind him. The young man, who seemed to have heard of this name, picked up the box in his hand and looked at the two words written on it, as if it was the first time he had seen it. He asked curiously, "Father, is this useful?" "Of course it's useless, idiot." The middle-aged man slapped the back of his head and reprimanded, "I've already used it. It's all a lie. Modern people's things are all so gaudy. In the end, it's useless, making people look forward to it in vain. Then why do we still need this thing? Aren't we going to Shambhala to see your second brother? The duck that we brought along was eaten by me on the way. It's not good to be empty-handed. I heard that he has started to lose his hair recently. If we give this to him, he'll be very happy. It's not good to lie to him like this, right? Idiot, this is called fatherly love. How is this lying? And he has lied to us a lot over the years. By the way, how much money do you have? Let's change to another bus." But the fare is so expensive. How did I teach you to be so stingy? You still dare to sit in the same bus as that scourge. Aren't you afraid of dying young? After reprimanding and arguing, the two men turned around and walked to the platform. The conversation gradually faded away. It disappeared. It was not until 5 minutes later that Huai woke up from his daze. He felt cold sweat seeping out from his back. He heard Crow's admiring sigh in his consciousness. You're so brave, young man. With your perfect ability to seek death, I won't be able to beat you soon. Huai did not react. Crow chuckled softly. Don't you know who was talking to you just now? Who? Huai was puzzled. He immediately jumped up from the chair and said in disbelief, Wait, the person beside him just now? Reputation? Isn't that the bastard who hit me in Jinling? Yes, it's him. Crow glanced at him pitifully. And the person who just spoke to you and was thoroughly offended by you is his adoptive father. The most wanted criminal in the entire realm, the culprit behind the fall of the kingdom of heaven, the uncrowned king known as the eighth of the 7 natural enemies, the greatest threat to the Astronomical Association, and the ultimate boss of Green Sunday. Oh my God. As soon as he stood up, Huai felt his legs go soft, and he almost fell to the ground. He was shivering. It was as if he was used to repeatedly jumping sideways. But in the end, he accidentally jumped onto the Tyrannosaurus Rex's face. Furthermore, he even danced the entire New Treasure Island song in his mouth before leaving with small steps while singing and dancing. It was only after he came to his senses that he realized how close he was to death. You have to think on the bright side. Crow comforted him. This can be considered a tribulation for the time being. For so many years, not many people in the Astronomical Society have been able to leave alive from his hands. You're equivalent to getting rid of half of your bad luck here. Well, at least half of it is. Isn't this your doing? Huai was furious. He did not care about being angry with her and took out his phone from his pocket. What are you doing? Reporting. Huai replied in a trembling voice. Reporting terrorists is the duty of every member of the Astronomical Society. Save it. It's useless. Crow sneered. If he was so easy to deal with, would he still be considered a big problem for the Astronomical Society? As long as he doesn't enter the present realm, the Astronomical Society can't do anything to him. No, now it seems that guy has already come out of the present realm. I understand now. Huh? How do you understand now? Huai widened his eyes and looked at her, not knowing what she was thinking. I understand the source of your stolen goods. Now that I think about it, I understand. Ha ha. Idiot, you did the right thing this time. You swallowed Green Sun's goods. Crow was overjoyed. That guy Ding Nank should be one of Green Sun's agents in the present realm. Ha! On the surface, he is a smuggler, but in fact, he is secretly a member of Green Sun. With the new and old grudges, your reputation in Green Sun has probably reached the point where you won't rest until you die, right? Maybe in a few years, even the Astronomical Society will give you the title of Green Sun's nemesis. Huai's face had turned green as Green Sunday. It was as if he had already seen his future miserable death in some corner, and he didn't even want to move. Is it too late for me to go home now? You've already bought the ticket. Crow patted his head with pity. They won't refund it. Huai was silent for a moment and made a painful decision. It's just 500,000. I'll just grit my teeth and throw it into the water. Wait, why is it 500,000? Crow sensed that something was wrong. Isn't it 3 million? Huai's expression stiffened, and he subconsciously avoided Crow's gaze. Well, this is a bit. It's a long story. You see, I was thinking 4 days and 3 nights is not long. Well then I thought, why should I spend 3 million just for a moment of comfort, right? Crow frowned. So, Huai coughed twice and said embarrassedly, so, I bought a standing ticket. Silence, a long silence. Crow was dumbfounded, not knowing whether to be astonishment or admiration. He couldn't help but sigh. You're really a little genius. Who said I wasn't? Huai shyly turned her head away, feeling a little embarrassed. Although he agreed with this point, he also knew that although he was good at everything, His only shortcoming was that he was too thin-skinned and couldn't be praised too much. But after being scared like this, he really couldn't take it anymore. He didn't want to get on the bus from the bottom of his heart. He didn't want to waste the $500,000. Seeing that the people in the waiting hall were so fierce, and even the boss of Green Sun came and left, he was really afraid that this was another survival game full of villains. This broken car. Don't tell me there's a hidden setting that only one person can reach the destination alive. Huaisher expressed doubts from the bottom of his heart. Crow sighed helplessly. I say, have you been persecuted too many times? Did it cause PTSD and paranoia? No, I just have a phobia of large vehicles. You can understand that, right? What if there's a murder on the Orient Express, a massacre on the Southern Express, or something like that? Wouldn't I be in trouble? If there's a bomb, I won't be able to run away. At this time, you should bring out your stubborn style. Crow glared at him. Forget it. I'll give you a suggestion. Do you see this worker who looks like he's about to die from overwork? After only a short moment of conversation, Crow raised his wings and pointed to the pale man in the gray suit next to him, the middle-aged worker known as the man in gray. As long as you stay with him all the way, even if the whole car blows up, you won't lose a single hair. That powerful? Huaisher was a little incredulous. Crow nodded. Yes, that's how powerful he is. But who is he? It was obvious that someone who could talk and laugh with the boss of Green Sun was definitely not an ordinary character, right? Crow glanced at him mischievously. Do you really want to know? Huaisher hesitated. Noticing Huaisher's curious gaze, the man in gray, who had been waiting for a long time, was stunned for a moment. He tried to squeeze out a gentle smile, but it couldn't hide the salted fish smell under the exhaustion of the worker. He looks like he's about to die from overwork at any time. He doesn't look like a peerless master. So, don't worry about it. You don't need to know too much. Just know that he's harmless to you. Crow patted him on the shoulder and comforted him. To tell you the truth, although this guy is a little unlucky, he's actually more harmless than anyone else. You can rest assured about this. Crow concluded decisively. He's the only one who won't try to hurt anyone. It was rare to get such a serious guarantee from Crow. This made Huaisher feel relieved, but at the same time, he was suspicious again. You're really not hiding anything from me, right? No. Crow shook his head like a rattle drum. Why would I hide this kind of thing from you? This time, I've respected your opinion enough and told you everything I know. Really? Really? Crow's eyes widened. His watery eyes were full of sincerity. I can swear. So, Huaisher finally felt relieved and prepared to get in the car. He didn't notice that Crow on his shoulder quietly breathed a sigh of relief. About the man in gray, she did tell Huaisher everything he needed to know. Well, except that he was actually a destruction elemental. Chapter 391. 15 minutes later, a section of the carriage set off from the station under the pull of an invisible gravitational force, accompanied by a whistle that came from nowhere. That's it. Huaisher looked around at the scenery in the carriage in astonishment. Where's the promised luxury? Where's the promised honorable experience? Where's the King good memory? He rubbed his teeth and suddenly wanted to pull out a knife to sharpen it. He wanted to cut someone. If it weren't for the fact that there were no trained personnel in this carriage at all. It was completely different from the expected luxury train, honorable experience, and meticulous and considerate service. Not only was there only a section of the carriage, but there wasn't even the front of the carriage, the interior of the carriage. It was like changing a freight train, right? There was no air conditioning, no cushions, and even the windows were broken. Fortunately, the chairs could be sat on, and there was no difference anyway. They were all small stools that cost 5 yuan in the market and were casually welded to the floor. And they weren't even welded properly. Even if they bought a standing ticket, this was too much. How was this worth 500,000 yuan? Someone had just said that people in the modern realm were all swindlers, but in the end, they encountered such rampant and malicious fraud at the border. They even dared to cheat the money of the Astronomy Society. It wasn't easy for him to get some stolen goods. This kind of goods couldn't even be considered average, yet they dared to limit the exemption. Huaisher was furious. She even had the urge to blow up the car. After a long time, he suppressed his anger and let out a long sigh. There was no other way. Plans couldn't keep up with changes. At worst, he could just get off at the next station. The key was to suck up to them first. He slowly looked at the gray-clothed man sitting on the folding stool next to him. The prematurely aged, middle-aged worker hugged his briefcase and leaned against the rusty carriage. The carriage swayed with the sound of the hammering of the rails. He looked extremely pitiful. This was too much. How could this group of people treat their big brother like this? Huaisher sat directly opposite him. With a bang, he seemed to be startled. Just as he was at a loss, he saw the serious face of the young man in front of him suddenly squeeze out a flattering smile and reach his hand into his pocket. Take Wagua, pow, pow, pow. A bottle of happy water, still cold, was taken out from the crack in his chest. Oh, thanks. The gray-clothed man was stunned for a long time, and then he was flattered. Before he could open the can, he saw Huaisher take out the lunchbox that Feng Shu had made for him before he left from his saddlebag. He opened it neatly, and a rich aroma spread out. He stuffed it into the hands of the gray-robed man. Dawa ci, chicken drumstick. Okay. Then, Huaisher rummaged in his pocket and took out a cigarette from the metal box. He opened it respectfully and offered it with both hands. Take was smoke this. Hold on. A minute later, the gray-clothed man, who was holding a bottle of Coke in his left hand and a box in his right, and had 2 cigarettes stuffed in his mouth, was dumbfounded to see Huaisher take out another bag of salted peanuts that Feng Shu had lovingly made. Big brother monked Sihua. When a man in gray struggled to take the peanuts, Huaisher magically took out a violin that she had made in her free time from her pocket. She smiled warmly and said, "Don't worry, I don't know what you're doing. Big brother, eat slowly. I'll accompany you." That's enough. The gray-clothed man's expression twitched, and he helplessly grabbed Huaisher's hand. Big brother, there's no need. There's really no need. Big brother, just call me Xiao Huai. Don't be so distant. Huaisher raised his hand and seriously stopped his big brother's behavior. As the saying goes, rely on your parents at home, and rely on your brothers when you go out. You and I feel like old friends at first sight. I'm just trying to be humble. Please don't refuse. What a joke. Huaisher was still preparing to massage Big Brother's back and shoulders later. It was not easy to meet such a golden thigh that was easy to hug, and it was so awesome that it could sit on the same level as Green Sun's boss. Would he still be human if he let go? You're my brother. I, little page of Huaihai Lu, will definitely make friends with you. Looking at his increasingly enthusiastic expression, the gray-clothed man became distressed. Even if you treat me like this, I can't do anything for you. Stopping Huaisher, who was about to speak, he sighed. In fact, I'm just an ordinary retired person. I'm not as powerful as that lady said. Please don't have any expectations for me. Besides, even without me, with your identity, you can still stay there, right? With that said, he carefully put things like happy drinks and edamame on the briefcase on his knees, raised both hands, and patted the shoulders of the young man in front of him seriously with a solemn expression. You should at least be more confident, Huaisher. Don't underestimate yourself. Holding the young man's shoulders, he said seriously, there's no need to rely on anyone. You're already a big shot. Huaisher was confused. He didn't know why this big brother had such a high opinion of him. Didn't they say that people would be punished if they walked in the sky? In short, there's still a little time before we reach the station. The gray-clothed man used the briefcase to pick up the food that Huaisher stuffed over, and a warm smile appeared on his pale face. There's too much food. I can't finish it alone. Can we eat together? Such a sincere invitation was far better than any ulterior motives to approach and curry favor. Huaisher was stunned for a long time. Then he nodded with a bitter smile. Okay. Just as the two people were eating peanuts and chicken drumsticks in the corner of the carriage, Huaisher felt the whole carriage suddenly shake. It seemed to rise into the air. When he poked his head out of the window, he felt the wind blowing in his face and the gray ocean slowly approaching above his head. Two rails that extended continuously under the carriage curled up and headed towards the sea and the sky, leading the carriage to fly into the sky and gallop between the dark sky and the sea. Behind them, the lights of the stone city had been left far behind. Huaisher shook his head, spat out 2 peanut shells in the wind, and stared ahead with wide eyes. The carriage was galloping forward, flying straight toward the ocean. It was as if it was going to break through the surface of the sea and rush into the sea. Instead of slowing down, it accelerated and became faster and faster. The hurricane was blowing in his face, and it was as if someone was pulling Huaisher's hair from behind. It was so fast that he couldn't react in time. By the time Huaisher retracted his head back into the carriage, his hair was already as messy as a beggar's, and it took him a long time to manage it. What the hell is going on? As if knowing what Huaisher was thinking, Crow said without looking back, "It's just an undercurrent. Don't make a fuss, silly boy." "Then explain it in advance, sister. Aren't I just getting ready?" Crow turned around and sighed helplessly. "Don't write what you want to say on your face, okay? You're making me feel like I can read your mind. It's embarrassing. Hurry up and explain it then." "Okay, the Ancient Tourism Company that operates the Star on behalf of the Ancient Tourism Company is a shareholding of Wangu Investment, and, as everyone knows, the Wangu Group is a puppet of the Continuation Court, so it's considered a big deal for the time being. However, the 61% shares of Ancient Tourism were not exchanged with money by Wangu Investment, but a navigation permit." Crow paused for a moment. The permit was issued by the terrifying existence of this endless ocean 40 years ago. The ruler Leviathan, who was above the crown bearer. Huaisher sighed helplessly. "Permit. Yes, permit." Crow coughed awkwardly and continued. "Any vehicle that holds the imprint of the permit can travel freely on this sea with the help of the currents of the endless ocean, regardless of depth and distance. In just a few hours, it can reach any place covered by the 17 currents. 17 currents. That is to say, there are a total of 17 navigation permits, which are held by 17 large pedigrees, enterprises, or powerhouses. Well, it doesn't matter if you call them the 17 Martial Seas. These 17 forces have completely monopolized the shipping and communication of the entire endless ocean." Well, that's all for Sister Crow's border general knowledge lesson for today. Is there anything you don't understand? Apart from knowing that with the permit, one can perform an ocean jump, I don't understand anything else. Huaisher said indifferently. Also, did you throw out a bunch of new settings without warning again? Please call this a step-by-step process, okay? I can't throw an 8 million word health survival guide at your face the first time we meet, right? Just as Huaisher was about to roll her eyes, she felt her body tremble. The scenery outside the window had been replaced by an endless grayish-blue color. It was the sea. The carriage had been smashed into the sea under the guidance of the rails, breaking through layers of seawater and sailing into the depths of the darkness. In the dead silence, only the low roar of the undercurrent in the distance could be heard. The undercurrent jump had begun. No one in the carriage spoke. Everyone felt a heavy chill in their hearts. Only Huaisher didn't feel the strange atmosphere around him at all. He was already standing in front of the window, looking up and looking outside. He could only see a dancing grayish blue, gradually dimming, and in an instant it was covered by darkness. He couldn't see anything, but he could feel that the train was madly galloping, as if it was pulled by an invisible rope, getting faster and faster. There were already people in the carriage who couldn't stand still and rolled on the ground. The gray-robed man's movements were fast. As if he was protecting some treasure, he grabbed the peanuts in the food box and bag, opened his mouth wide, and bit the chicken leg flying in the air, then raised his 2 legs and clamped the briefcase. He was in a difficult situation, but he successfully defended the dignity of food. Huaisher turned his head and was about to help, but the corner of his eyes glimpsed the endless darkness outside the window. The darkness seemed to squirm. Chapter 392. He froze on the spot and narrowed his eyes to look over. In an instant, he was in a trance, and then he quickly lost blood. The mirror of nothingness was frantically extracting his blood, and in an instant, it had drained the vitality of more than a dozen ordinary people. Huaishur subconsciously held onto the wall to stabilize his body. Then he saw it. From a reflection of the mirror of nothingness, he saw through the layer of the abyss that could not be broken by the naked eye and spiritual sense. It should not be said that he saw it, but he felt it like an intuition. Driven by the small and subtle reaction of the premonition of death, the mirror of nothingness quickly extracted information from Huaishur's perception, eyes, ears, subconscious, and even spiritual sense. It analyzed and detected the essence of this darkness, and in an instant, revealed the blurry outline behind the darkness. It was just a feeling. It was like seeing countless nightmare bubbles rising in the crazy sea abyss, shining with a crazy light in the darkness, and each bubble echoed with endless wails and screams. But then, with a terrifying twist, the bubbles slowly rotated, and a texture like amber, emerald, copper, and diamond emerged, turning into noble and ferocious eyes one after another. The darkness was the limb that carried the eyes, and the roar of the tide was his breath at this moment, as if sensing the gaze of a reptile. The noble in the darkness lowered his arrogant eyes, took a quick glance, and withdrew his gaze without interest. Only Huaishur was left slumped on the chair, panting violently and sweating profusely. It was not until half an hour later that he reacted and felt the thirst in his lungs. "Hurry up, drink some water." The gray-clothed man held his head, opened his chin, and poured half a can of happy water in. Huaishur swallowed instinctively like a retard. It took a long time for him to return to normal. His little finger twitched. It was different from the leader of Green Sunday. It was the instinctive fear and dread of a human towards a foreign species, and the tearing pain from the premonition of death. What was even more inconceivable to him was that even though it was just a flash of inspiration at the beginning, that speculation seemed to have come alive. It took root and sprouted in his consciousness, growing on its own and evolving into that maddening silhouette. Fortunately, he was not interested in Huaishur. If he had thought, this little thing is quite cute, let me take a second look, Huaishur would have been dead by now. When he retracted his gaze, Huaishur's impression of him quickly faded and disappeared. That wisp of inspiration also left. Even the Book of Destiny didn't describe the scene Huaishur had just witnessed in detail. There was no real record of it. There's no need to think about it. The body is meaningless to him. Crow shook his head helplessly. Once a group leader reaches the level of ruler, they have already merged their existence with hell and become a living hell that wanders below the known depths. Such an existence, if placed in 1700 years ago, could already be considered a genuine devil king. As she spoke, she began to rejoice in his misfortune. Congratulations, you've learned a lesson from the archaeological team. Don't look around just because you have good ears and eyes, especially when you have something like the mirror of nihility. This is the range of the ability to deal with after the fifth order. The current you is still too young. Huaishur's face twitched, and he forced a smile. Yes, I also feel that I'm bearing the burden of being handsome and beautiful that I shouldn't have at my age. You can still talk nonsense. That means you're fine. Crow shook his head. If you still have the strength to raise your head, you can look outside the window now. She said, "We're reaching our destination." Destination? Following her words, Huaishur, the current deep-sea PTSD patient, mustered up his courage and looked out of the window, only to find that the creeping darkness had dissipated. Accompanied by the cheers of all the passengers, the carriage broke out of the sea and came to a dark sea, hanging upside down in the sky. Only a lone lamp hanging on the carriage flickered slowly. It was still moving forward, even if there was nothing in front of it, until Huaishur heard a roar. It was another loud noise breaking out of the sea. Accompanied by the waves, a luxurious and ancient carriage broke out of the sea. From hundreds of meters away, he could see the exquisite decorations, warm lights, and even the sound of dance music. Damn, why was the carriage of others so good, but the one he was sitting in was wrapped in a layer of iron? Before Huaishir could react, loud noises broke out of the sea one after another. Carriage after carriage emerged from all directions, penetrating the obstruction of the deep sea and emerging on the empty sea at this moment. Some were old, some were new, some were broken, and some were complete. Even the era, style, and color of the creation were completely different. Hundreds? Thousands? Tens of thousands? In the blink of an eye, Huaishir had already lost count of the number of carriages on this sea, a terrifying scale that was enough to move all railway nerds to tears. Countless translucent rails crisscrossed here, exquisitely merged, pieced together, and in the end, the carriages were connected to each other, bursting out with a roar like the tide. In all directions, there was metal constantly colliding with each other, making a pleasant buzzing sound. Some were pieced together, some were parallel, and then Huaishir saw the roof of their carriage suddenly open and spread out to the sides, delicately piecing together with the parallel trains on both sides. It formed a solid ground. Huaishir was shocked from the depths of his soul. He could feel that at this moment, almost endless metal was born from the surging sea of origin substance. And at the end of his line of sight, a shadow as large as a mountain was gradually taking shape as the carriages pieced together. That seemed to be a city. That's right, the entire city seemed to be running on rails. Right in front of him, sharp whistles burst forth, echoing each other. Accompanied by a loud noise, the carriage Huaishir was in suddenly drifted violently on the tracks, crashing into a gap that had been set aside, which then closed up seamlessly. Fresh air rushed to his face. As the carriages rose and fell, a massive station quickly took shape at the edge of the city, enveloping Huaishir and the other passengers. First, it was the pillars, then the walls, and finally the ceiling. Then, gorgeous decorations appeared out of thin air. A bright red carpet spread from the end to the end, and hundreds of exquisite crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, sprinkling down soft light. This place had become a huge transportation hub. It was a station made up of trains. No, it was a city made up of trains. It was still moving forward on the tracks. What is this? He looked around at all of this, dumbfounded, in disbelief. This is the beginning of a journey, young man. Under the young man's arrow, the crow chuckled softly. A special travel train that patrols the borders of Asia every year. A mirage that only exists for 4 days and 3 nights. A world in a box created by the hands of the past. This is the sea of stars formed by the lonely stars. Although I don't have the right to say this, I'll still say it to you. The crow raised its wings and pointed forward happily. Welcome to the moving border, Stellaris. Now, they finally got on the train. Huaishir sat down on the stool and looked around in a daze. It was hard to accept. You're telling me that this is a train? Welcome to Stellaris. I hope you can enjoy this wonderful journey in the next 4 days. The third station has been connected. Please enter in an orderly manner. There will be staff to guide you later. Please observe public order. Do not. Amidst the sound of the horn above, a soft female voice was broadcasting in various languages. After eating the last edamame, the satisfied, gray-robed man's face was flushed. He let out a long sigh. How satisfying. He solemnly closed the food box and handed it back to Huaishir with both hands. Excellent cooking. If possible, I really want to meet that gentleman. He picked up his briefcase, got up, and nodded to Huaishir and the crow. Thank you for your hospitality on the journey. I sincerely hope that we won't meet again. He paused for a moment and hurriedly looked down at the notebook in his pocket. He quickly closed it, leaned over, and whispered to Huaishir, don't have anything to do with the finite society. It's best if you get off the train tomorrow. Also, don't go to the Gray Coast next month. Why? Huaishir was confused. Before he could say anything, the gray-robed man took his briefcase and disappeared into the crowd. It wasn't until a few seconds later that he reacted. Wait a minute, why did Big Brother Thai abandon me and leave? He walked so fast that Huaishir couldn't catch up with him. When Huaishir rushed into the crowd, he could no longer see the tired figure of the gray-robed man. But there was no regret or unwillingness in his heart. Instead, There was a trace of melancholy of seeing off an old friend. If I had known, I would have invited him to eat more. Huaishir sighed and touched his waist bag. There were still a lot of things made by feng shui in it. He could have taken a few bags with him. He felt regretful. That overtime maniac actually revealed his work to you. It seems that you get along very well. Crow sighed softly, as if talking to himself. He chuckled softly. But it's the finite society? Hey, it's really unexpected. Is that little bitch preparing to start trouble again in the past few years? Or is there someone else behind her? Huaishir turned around and glared at this unreliable guy. Even if he resisted in every way, in the end, he was still fooled by this guy to come here. As the saying goes, the crow rises 10 feet. There was no other way. He was about to accept his fate. Then what should I do next? Huaishir sighed helplessly. The main mission is broken here. Do I have to find the clues myself? Don't worry, there's still a long time. Let's walk around first. Crow shook his head. You're just here for a tour and to collect materials for your advancement. Why do you look like you're ready to risk your life? Who do you think did this to me? Huaishir rolled his eyes and was about to retort when he heard a surprised voice behind him. Why? Sure? He turned around and saw the travelers coming out of the luxurious carriage behind him. Among them, a seemingly familiar young man poked his head out and looked over in disbelief. Why are you here? Who was that? Huaishir froze for a moment. He didn't remember at first. Ah, what a coincidence. Huaishir awkwardly squeezed out a smile. You're not that. The name was at the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't say it, until the young man's expression gradually twitched and reminded him, Yuan Zhao. Oh, Yuan Zhao. Huaishir clapped her hands in surprise and went up to him, enthusiastically holding his hands. Look, isn't this a coincidence? Isn't this a coincidence? As the saying goes, even if Crow closed the door for you, there must be a window that she didn't notice. Wasn't this his good brother, who hadn't appeared in the Book of Destinies for several months? Joy and happiness that couldn't be faked seeped out from his smile. Even Yuan Zhao, who was about to get angry, was stunned in place. Then he felt a little embarrassed. At first, he thought that this bastard had forgotten about him. He didn't expect him to be so happy to see him. So he misunderstood? He didn't notice what Huaishir was happy about. Meal ticket was finally settled. Huaishir was overjoyed. Chapter 393. Meeting an old friend was an extremely joyous thing, especially in this kind of remote corner of the border, especially when you were about to end up on the streets and starving. Yuan Zhao seemed to have grown a pair of wings as he descended from the sky with a fresh meal ticket. Huaishir couldn't help but feel grateful. I didn't treat you like a good brother in vain. But how did you end up like this? After being disheveled by the sea breeze, he had also been scared into a cold sweat by the Leviathan. If it weren't for the Book of Destiny, his origin substance would have been scattered by that one glance. Huaishir didn't need to look in a mirror to know how haggard he looked. It's a long story, Huaishir sighed. He couldn't say that he had been tricked by the black-hearted crow on his shoulder. Could he? He could only change the subject. What about you? I was with Yuan Zhao's eyes twitched, as if he had finally remembered something. Then, Huaishir heard a cold voice speak from behind him. Ah, Zhao, pay attention to your manners. Next to the luggage behind him, the gray-dressed girl raised her head to look at him and asked coldly, You've made everyone wait for so long. Shouldn't you introduce your friends? Only now did Huaishir notice that Yuan Zhao had quite a few companions behind him. They all seemed to be around the same age. Apart from the old attendant behind the girl, there weren't many who were older than Huaishir. However, regardless of whether it was their reserved or luxurious clothing, Huaishir could see the indifference in their casual expressions, as well as the fluctuations coming from their bodies. Damn, these little bastards all had at least 4 or 5 border relics on them. Even their cufflinks had inscriptions carved into them. How rich were they? In particular, the gray-dressed girl's cold eyes were filled with traces of lightning. Huaishir could sense that her origin substance fluctuations were even stronger than Yuan Zhao's. In fact, they were even a bit sharper than Yuan Zhao's. She was actually 8 times as strong as Yuan Zhao's. It was obvious that he respected her greatly. After being reprimanded in front of everyone, the Chinibyu teenager, Yuan Zhao, actually didn't get angry. Instead, he nodded and turned around to introduce her. This is Huai Shi. He's my good friend. I met him in the rookie competition. Hearing this, the girl in the gray dress raised her eyes and looked at Huai Shi. She didn't know where her younger brother got to know such a strange character. She raised her eyebrows slightly, but didn't show any dissatisfaction. She just nodded at Huai Shi reservedly. Then, Yuan Zhao introduced his companions one by one to Huai Shi. This is my cousin, Yuan. Next to her is Feng Chu. This is Zhao Xinya. This is Wang Su. And this is Hut in the Woods, huh? Huai Shi was stunned for a moment. He didn't hear clearly. Lin what? Yuan Zhao seemed to be used to this kind of thing. He coughed twice and explained, his surname is Lin and his name is Zhong Huaxia. Nice to meet you. Huai Shi nodded at the handsome teenager who looked like a girl. He really didn't know how his parents' brains worked. How could they give their child such a name? It's okay. I'm used to it. The little hut in the woods smiled warmly and waved at Huai Shi warmly. Just call me Little 19. That's what my family calls me. By the way, I don't have a problem with you at all. Huai Shi was puzzled until the teenager who called himself Little 19 reminded him softly. My surname is Lin. Huai Shi's face twitched. Surnamed Lin? Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Don't worry. She is her, and I am me. Lin 19 waved his hand calmly and still smiled. Besides, I'm still young and haven't learned how to offend people. Was there anyone who taught him this? Huai Shi felt that it was really an eye-opener. The Lin family was really well educated. Don't worry, the Lin family, how should I say it, is very strange. Yuan Zhao whispered next to him. Although they're disliked everywhere, they never care if their family members are beaten to death outside. It's said that the old man of the Lin family is very optimistic about you and said that it's a pity that you don't take the path of evil. Was the Lin family an alliance of disliked people? Gathering 7 of the most disliked people could make a wish to rule the world? Thinking of this, Huai Shi couldn't help but turn around and glare at Crow. Was this the solution you were talking about? They didn't even look into it. But you've already settled it for me? Hurry up and refund my money. Crow blinked innocently. It was as if he was just an ordinary crow and didn't know what he was talking about. After the introductions, everyone knew each other. Yuan Zhao enthusiastically invited Huai Shi to join them. Huai Shi was thinking about sponsor partnerships, so he naturally hit it off. However, except for Lin Shurjiu, the others were obviously uninterested in Huai Shi. After that, they became cold and acted as if they didn't see him. Wang Su, who was walking in front, almost laughed out loud when he saw Huai Shi's outfit. He whispered something to Zhao Xinya. Zhao Xinya turned around and looked at Huai Shi. She couldn't help but punch his shoulder while trying to stifle her laughter. How can you say that about him? Yuan Zhao frowned. When he looked at Huai Shi, he was a little embarrassed and whispered, Many of my sister's classmates are idiots. Don't lower yourself to their level. Huai Shi didn't feel anything. He just felt that he wasn't very popular. He wasn't angry. When he was performing with his cello, he had heard worse things than this many times. Money was hard to earn, and shit tasted bad. If they all got angry because of a few words, they would have died long ago. Besides, it was so convenient to follow them. They could directly go through the VIP channel and didn't have to line up. It was so convenient, and there was a big meal to eat later. What a bargain. At worst, he would use his appetite to teach these young people a lesson and teach them that you can't judge a book by its cover. Thinking of food, he took out the edamame from his pocket and gave Yuan Zhao some so that he could try it when he had time. Yuan Zhao didn't mind. He took it and asked, Where did you buy it? Why didn't I see it in the car? I made it myself and brought it with me. Huai Shi answered casually. Then he saw the shoulders of the people walking in front of him shake as if they were holding back laughter. Only Yuan Zhao's face turned green when he thought of the damn thing Huai Shi made in the last live broadcast. He held a bag of things in his hand and didn't know whether to eat it or not. Don't worry. Huai Shi shook his head. I learned this from Feng Shu. You won't die from eating it. It's just that there's a little too much salt. Drink more water when you eat. Okay. He accepted Huai Shi's gift skeptically, fearing that this bastard wanted to harm him. Obviously, the last live broadcast didn't just create a patient with abyssal food phobia. After all, not everyone had such a good appetite as the judges of the cooking demon competition. The two of them walked at the back of the line and deliberately distanced themselves from the others. Seeing Huai Shi quickly stuffing snacks into his mouth, Yuan Zhao couldn't help but shake his head. Don't eat too much. We made a reservation for the abyssal level here at noon. Don't eat too much. Don't worry. Huai Shi waved his hand. I could do it. There was a faint laughter in front of them. Wang Su turned around and glanced at Huai Shi. He asked Yuan Zhao with a faint smile, "How about we change to a cheaper restaurant at noon? This way, your friend can eat more comfortably." "Don't talk like that." Zhao Xinya gently hammered him. He shook his head indifferently. "Wang Su, I've given you face, haven't I?" Yuan Zhao rubbed his gums and suddenly raised his eyebrows. "I've tolerated your nonsense all the way. How about I simply train you here?" The fierceness that had been suppressed by his cousin for a long time emerged slightly. Wang Su's smile stiffened. When he was about to say something, a sudden sharp sound burst out. A deep hoof print appeared on the floor beside him, wedged into the iron stone. The sound was sharp. It was only one step away from him. It stopped abruptly. "Don't be angry." Huai Shi pressed his shoulder and shook his head. "It's just a meal. There's no need to quarrel over this. We can make an appointment another day." There was no need to watch a group of children fight over this. Face was not earned in this way. Although there was only a few years between them, in Huai Shi's view, these overt and covert taunts were still too childish. Probably those who really annoyed him were chopped to death by him, right? Today's Huai Shi was simply too calm. Yuan Zhao still wanted to say something, but he saw Huai Shi waving his hand and kicking his bag to leave. Wang Su did not appreciate it. Instead, he snorted twice, turned around, and continued to walk forward with his friends. Only Yuan Zhao remained in the same place. "What are you waiting for, Zhao?" He heard his cousin's urging voice. He opened his mouth to say something, but in the end, he hung his head dejectedly and followed. But Yuan stood in the same place and did not move. Instead, he tilted his head and looked at him with a puzzled expression. "What's wrong? You abandoned your friend just like that? Didn't I just tell you to pay attention to etiquette?" Yuan shook his head and sighed unhappily. "Won't you be with him?" Yuan Zhao was stunned for a long time and did not react. Then he was surprised and incredulous. "Then, I'm leaving?" Yuan sighed again and turned back to say, "Uncle Ping, give him some money, but not too much. Come back before 9 o'clock, okay?" The latter part of the sentence was directed at Yuan Zhao. Yuan Zhao nodded crazily. It was not clear whether he heard it or not. Like a child on vacation, after taking the money, he ran directly to Huai Shi like a wild dog out of its leash. He even winked at him proudly and beamed with joy, meaning that he would take him to Kong Kang's things in the afternoon. "No, you're leaving the team, just like that?" Huai Shi was stunned. "Anyway, they're my sister's classmates. They're not close to me." Yuan Zhao shrugged indifferently, lifted his small chin, and said proudly, "Let's go. I'm the big brother anyway. Today, I'll take you to live the life of a rich person." Huai Shi laughed and thought about the few £100s of pure gold in his bag. Well, it was better not to take it out to break his little brother's self-confidence. Bang! A crisp sound suddenly burst out, and the entire train station suddenly shook for a moment. Huai Shi's footsteps stopped. The ground was moving. He and Yuan Zhao looked at each other. With the sound of steel rubbing against each other, right in front of Huai Shi, the original exit of the station, together with the whole huge wall, instantly disintegrated and shrank into the floor, disappearing. It was incredible. The whole Stellaris was like a machine that could be assembled at will. It could slide, change shape, rise or fall at will, forming a new space and structure. At this moment, with the disintegration of the wall, the spacious space outside the station like a street was revealed. Even if there was no sky, there was still a soft light replacing the existence of the sun, sprinkling pure light. The bustling street was surging with people. Excited tourists walked through the streets, talking about where to go next. At this moment, they were also stunned by this scene. They looked back in shock. Then, they saw the place where the exit of the station was a huge carriage that was a little too big, pulled by 4 vigorous and huge black horses. The pitch-black carriage just existed there, as if there was an invisible gravitational force, pulling everyone's gaze, making them carefully look at the exquisite and luxurious carriage, understanding the solemnity. In front of the carriage, a tall and straight old man dressed in formal wear, holding an ivory cane, looked up at the inside of the station. His green eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, sweeping across the faces of the tourists one by one. Then, his eyes lit up, and he rushed over with big strides. That speed was just like collecting a debt, afraid that if he was a step late, the guy who borrowed the debt would run away. Huaisher was shocked. He couldn't help but give the old man a thumbs up. Debt collection should be like this, swift and decisive, until he found that under the gaze of everyone, the old man was coming straight for him. He had an ominous premonition. Did Crow borrow money here behind his back? Can't you think of me a little better? Crow sighed. He's here for you. With a crisp sound, the cane fell to the ground. The old man had already stood 3 steps in front of Huaisher and bowed. Welcome, Your Excellency Huaisher. He took off his hat, reverently and respectfully. Please forgive this old man for being late. The concert hall prepared for you by the Hells United Music Association has been cleaned, and we look forward to your arrival. Huh? Huaisher's expression twitched. How did you know I was here? Great. He felt that when he went out, his itinerary was leaked everywhere. 5 minutes before the train entered the station, we saw your register information in the passenger directory. After confirming with the headquarters, we immediately applied for an exclusive venue for you from the supervisor. Unfortunately, time was tight, and we couldn't prepare a welcoming ceremony. The old man answered solemnly, raised his hand to guide his gorgeous carriage, and said enthusiastically, If you don't mind, please take this old man's carriage. Please rest assured, even if only one person comes, the noble identity of a calamity musician must be highlighted. Huaisher's expression twitched. In the silence, Yuan Zhao raised his eyes and glanced at his dull, traveling companions not far away, and asked in a low voice, Hey, Huaisher, you're not deliberately playing some trick, are you? I'm not. I don't know. Huaisher hurriedly waved his hand and glared at him. You're so young. Why do you read so many online novels? You should study more, understand? Huh. The top student of Jixia junior class cast a pitiful look at a certain trash who could only mix in a special class. You're so awesome. This lunch is on you. Out of his understanding of Huaisher, he said directly, Don't fool me with Sha County. Take out something better. You're daydreaming. Huaisher rolled his eyes. 50 per person, no more. Yuan Zhao was furious. Sure enough, you bastard, seeing how enthusiastic I am. You want a freeload, right? Immediately after, he felt a huge shadow looming over him. A burly figure appeared behind him. The bald man was wearing a brown Ingzhou robe, and there were tattoos of Yiksha on his neck and face. His head was bald, and he looked very fierce. As if there was no one else around, he pushed the ticket inspector aside and bowed deeply to Huaisher at a 90-degree angle. He handed over a letter with both hands. His voice was loud and clear like a clap of thunder, scaring Yuan Zhao. Who are you? Huaisher found the tattoo rather familiar. After flipping through the Book of Destiny, he suddenly recalled the chef's apprentice who had poured wine for him beside head chef Watanabe at Yamatai. Grass? He couldn't believe it. How did you suddenly become so strong? How is Mr. Watanabe? Thank you for your concern. I am very grateful. Grass replied with a loud voice that made people's ears hurt. The master craftsman has been promoted to 3 stars in Tengu Mountain and was given the name Dragon Mountain Restaurant by Day Tengu. Now he's invited to stay on Chu Xing's ship. He is very happy to hear that you are coming and hopes that you can spare some time to meet him. A handwritten letter was lifted and moved closer to him, eagerly attentive. Who was it that said I wanted a freeload? In the silence, Huaisha reached out and took the invitation letter and turned back to Yuan Zhao with a proud grin. Do you know what a big shot is, brother? Yuan Su could only roll his eyes after being thoroughly showcased. When he was useful, he called him Big Brother, and when he was useless, he treated him as a little brother. What a scum. Finally, I feel a little like a tourist. Huaisha looked around and sighed softly. Suddenly, he recalled the words that the gray-clothed man had said to him, and finally had a little personal experience of his respected identity. A big shot who didn't need to rely on anyone. He didn't need to think about hugging anyone's thigh anymore. Instead, he was actually walking on the road to become a golden thigh that others dreamed of hugging. He was getting stronger little by little. Gradually, he was different from his former down-and-out self. Even if it was different from the meteoric rise in his fantasy, he now had achievements that he could hold his head high and boast to others. Even compared to those huge, great undertakings, this achievement still seemed a little small. But there was no doubt that he had taken a solid first step, and there were more scenery waiting for him to enjoy in front of him. So, since everyone gave him so much face, it didn't hurt to be arrogant occasionally, right? Thinking of this, the boy flipped his messy hair coquettishly, put his hand on Yuan Zhao's shoulder, and waved his hand. Let's go. Huaisha grinned. Big Brother will take you to sponsored partnerships. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.